like to call to order the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. Begin with a roll call, please.
Yes, Ms. Beebe.
Present.
Ms. Beebe is present. Ms. Bofey.
Here.
Ms. Bofey is present. Ms. Bradford is absent. Mr. Garvey.
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio.
Present.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Hill. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Dr. Moranti.
Here.
Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones.
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer.
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. Mr. Wagasback. Mr. Nalcan.
Present.
Mr. Nalcan is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. And before we begin, I'm going to recognize Ms. Beebe, who I believe wanted to recognize someone quickly before we begin the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. I'd like to welcome Representative Chris Leopold, Plaquemines Parish, and I'm sure other districts, but I know him in his service to Plaquemines Parish, and of course Superintendent Dennis Roussel, Plaquemines Parish as well. And if I'm in order, Mr. Romer, at this point, I would like to acknowledge Mr. Alex Nakan, our BESE student representative, who will be relinquishing his position to Mr. Peyton Chasson. Both students hail from the Lafourche Parish school system, and I take it that these representatives from Lafourche Parish are here to keep me in line. So I do appreciate them, and I certainly want to commend Alex for his role on BESE. He has been one to take this position very responsibly. He has spoken up on many issues, and I applaud him, and I have no doubt that he can be anything that he desires to be. In fact, he may be on this seat one day.
I appreciate it, and we do have an agenda item, and Mr.
Okay,
Nalcan.
I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine, and Mr. Nalcan will certainly recognize you shortly and welcome any comments you have at that time as well.
Yes, sir.
If we can, let's call for the agenda. Okay, that's fine.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding item 4.1 only, pulling item 4.2.
Motion. So moved. First item. And a second, quickly.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Gill. Any objection? Hearing none. So moved. First item.
First item is on page 1. Consideration of approval of non-public school academic classifications. The department recommendation is lengthy. It is to approve the non-public school academic classifications, changing Red River to accredited approved, revising the March 2013 board action regarding the 2013-14 academic classification for the St. Peter School in Vermilion Parish from accredited approved to non-accredited approved. Also noting that the annual report regarding non-public schools academic classification is approved annually by the board in June, and the board has been presented with this information for approval in March and April 2013, therefore will not be reported in June and be deleted from the agenda.
Okay, that's the recommendation, board members, and before you, I want to ask you to repeat that specifically, but I will say this, if you don't mind, Ms. Davis, if you would, there is some wording in that recommendation that is slightly different, is my understanding, than what is written. Could you clarify exactly where that is so board members would understand that?
The Red River.
The Red River, I believe.
Yes, sir. The Red River item is page 4. Alphabetically, Red River is listed as non-accredited approved, and it will be changed to accredited approved.
Okay, so does everyone understand that recommendation? Do I have a motion to approve that recommendation?
I so moved.
There's a motion and a second. And Ms. Hill, you have a question?
Why was it considered non-accredited approved?
They simply did not report. They checked the wrong box on their application.
So we have verified that they met the requirements and they have the
Yes, with SACs, yeah.
We do have a comment card on this item. I don't know.
I can frame this. Members, as you know, a year ago we revised the process for the approving of non-public schools, which is simply an approval to provide public funds to private schools, as has been done for decades. That mainly is in textbook dollars, which is $27 per children, as well as the right to transportation and the right to have your students become TOPS eligible. none of these schools is participating in the scholarship program. When we overhauled the program, we looked first for independent accreditation. We said if you're not independently accredited, we're going to accredit you ourselves through a review process. Every one of these schools has been through this process, but none of these schools is participating in the student scholarship program. That is a different set of schools that have been approved as non-public eligible in months past. So this is sort of the second batch not eligible for the scholarship program.
Before I recognize the card, does anybody have a current question? I'd like to call Terry Bickow, Louisiana Montessori Association. And please state your name for the record. Thank you.
I'm Terry Bickham, and I'm representing the president. Terry Bickham, I'm the president of Louisiana Montessori Association, and I'm representing the non-public Montessori schools in the state of Louisiana. And in the past few weeks, I forwarded a letter that I sent to a department at LDE, but I wanted to make sure that we were on record that in the past few weeks, the heads of the Louisiana non-public Montessori schools were issued an email from LDE stating the recommendation of approval, which would be listed as non-accredited schools. As the state authorized certifying authority of the non-public Montessori schools in Louisiana and on behalf of the membership, LMA did formally object to the non-accredited classification. We believe that the recommendation should say accredited, approved, non-public Montessori schools. This is in accordance with the state law, and BESE should issue the status for the non-public Montessori schools listed by LMA in the annual school report and analysis issued during the reporting period. LMA also objects to the omission of Chapter 35 in the non-public Bulletin 741 as the chapter allows for the implementation of the law, Act 400, the law that was mandated specifically for non-public Montessori schools and a BESE joint accreditation. We've worked alongside with the Louisiana Department of Education and with BESE for the past 40 years. We were the forerunners of early childhood education in 1972 and the only entity that was had a specific curriculum for children ages 3 to 6 years. Jointly, we have helped to ensure state-approved quality Montessori education for students 3 through 14 years. We've certified non-public Montessori schools and Montessori teachers for state certification. But in the past few weeks, we discovered that decisions and recommendations are being made without our knowledge or our consideration. LMA was not informed or invited to participate in changing policy that would affect our schools, our teachers, but most importantly, our children in the non-public Montessori schools. In the correspondence that we sent to you from LMA last week, it noted that during the state-sponsored webinar last November, it was communicated that Montessori school status would remain as schools in accreditation under the new LDE Category 2 that was being contemplated by LDE. This led us to believe that the LDE changes in the department would not adversely affect our schools. Yet, this action was taken not in accordance with Act 400, and it provides for non-public schools, therefore, which is not in compliance with the law. Our philosophy and our principles are unique and separate from traditional ideas in education. The mere fact that the public domain is interested in learning and implementing Montessori strategies in the schools should be an indication that this method merits consideration and stands the test of time. So we're asking you, we're impelling you and imploring you, BESE, to approve and accredit our schools as accredited, approved, non-public Montessori schools for the 2013-2014 school year. This, we feel, will assure that the major stakeholders, our children, will have received their education from an accredited source, which they rightfully deserve. I have a letter for you, and I have attached the letter from Mr. Adamhoff from the LDE office that states that they will recommend this. I just want to make sure that non-accredited is taken off of our status, and it is said to have accredited approved. So
Thank
I want
you.
to thank you for listening to me and letting me come. I'll attach this information.
Thank you for your
Members,
comments.
if I can just maybe sort of put this into context. you have two different classification systems running up against each other here, which is that you approve schools as Montessori schools officially. You also approve schools as accredited approved and non-accredited approved. And so you have this Montessori accreditation system that's running up against this question of accreditation approved versus non-accreditation approved. And I think it's an issue of semantics because as on the staff side, our desire is to honor the great work of our Montessori schools by and not disrespect them as listing them as non-accredited. However, the board's current policy does not list the Montessori accreditation as an independent accreditation. Thus, they received a letter saying, while you are a Montessori school, you are not an independently accredited school, so you have to go through our process. And the request has been to call them accredited approved rather than to call them non-accredited approved because they have been accredited through the Montessori Association. We support that idea.
Okay, but may I also say that that has been communicated to us this week, but we also are concerned that on any list, on any non-public school listing, that non-accredited terminology will still be on there, and that will affect our schools and will affect our children, and that they are not being served in an accredited school. So that's my concern, and the fact that we were told in November that we would be in the category, that LMA would be in that category, and now we have not been. So that's where our concern is, and I would really like that to be considered.
Why don't, can we agree to this then? For any list that is created on our staff, we are not going to list you, meaning Montessori schools, on the non-accredited list. And this does not affect finances or anything like that. It is an issue of semantics. We have to work this out with you. In the meantime, before we do, we will not list any Montessori school on any list of schools as non-accredited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent, I have a question.
Ms. Hill. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Just recognize you.
My question is, so those schools that's on the list that's non-accredited approved, would that hinder the students from receiving TOPS or any other scholarships?
No, they're approved.
Okay,
They're approved,
okay.
yeah,
I just
they're
wanted to
approved.
make sure. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Wagerspack.
Since you mentioned earlier there's a BESE procedure which triggered the letter, are there any steps you need to take today or votes you need to take today to give you all and your staff the guidance or the policy approval you need to go and work this out, or do you have what you need?
I think we have what we need.
Okay.
Let me, does our motion need to be adjusted in any way?
The agreement that I recognize it's oral, but I think just in the best interest of everybody, the concern is a semantics and aesthetics concern, not a policy concern. There might be a long-term policy switch we need to make toward having the Montessori accreditation be an independent accreditation, but for now, I think we should just work on the semantics of it, and we will do that with the association, and we will agree not to list them on any list of non-approved schools.
Are they on this list? Where are they?
There's several different Montessori schools on this list, Mr. Lee.
Well, without having to do that, can we just modify the motion to list them as accredited?
You could, except that we would then have to go back and look at the policy as to those. We'd have to amend the policy that lists which agencies are independent accrediting agencies. I would prefer to allow, and if you'd like to issue a directive to the staff to examine this question, I'm happy to, of course, examine it. We're going to anyways. But in other words, I'd rather not have to go back and amend a policy that exists on the books right now.
And this is a question. Is it appropriate to remove them from this list at this moment and approve the list with them removed and have your department come back to us in June, or is that inappropriate? Does that cause you more difficulty?
I can't speak for them. If I were those schools, I would want them to be approved now. I would approve them and then create an instruction to us to consider reclassification of them on this list and bring that back to the board.
Could we have I would like to suggest a motion to that effect. that approves this as read by staff with the directive to the department to not list, how would you like us to state it properly?
To
direct staff to deal with the Montessori school appropriately given current policy?
To direct staff to consider Montessori classification as an approved independent accreditation.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
There's a motion, and there's a motion by Ms. Lee, Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Wagasback. Any other questions? Any other comments? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 3.1 on page 6. Consideration of report on the early childhood community pilot recipients. The department recommendation is to receive.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion to receive, and there's a second
second.
by Ms. Bofi. Motion by Mr. Gio. Any questions or comments?
May I, Mr.
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Superintendent, and then I'll
Thank you.
Ms. Hill.
Members, I just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge, especially since we have a large audience this afternoon, I think that this is one of the most exciting things this board and this department have taken on. It represents a seismic shift in the way that we consider our youngest learners. And it is truly because of the energies of local districts and local charter school organizations that this is happening, as well as our partners in Head Start and our partners in child care. There are 15 parishes and 13 applications that have been deemed winners of our first early childhood network pilots. These range in every one of your districts and every region in the state to groups that are going to come together and literally unify the Head Start system, the child care system, and the pre-kindergarten system under one system of standards, under one system of assessment and enrollment and parent information, one system of accountability, one system of planning, and at a basic level, one system to identify every child. Every 3- and 4-year-old child in these parishes will be identified by these consortia. These groups are showing us the way to the implementation of Act 3, which was passed by last year's legislative session, and really are starting a wave of progress in early childhood in our state, getting away from a fragmented system of early childhood toward a unified system of early childhood. And so I thank them and congratulate them for their participation in this program.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Hill, and then Mr. Wagasback.
Okay. I guess my concern would be in reference to what was stated in booklet that the list was going to be on board docs by April 15th, and now we're just receiving the list. So I'm just concerned about the transparency here. Here it is now, we're just receiving it before, a couple of seconds before we get ready to approve it. So what has transpired that it wasn't presented in a timely manner to us?
It's not an item for approval. It's an item to receive. It was placed on board docs yesterday, April 15, and today we're just passing it out as a courtesy. But we announced it publicly, yesterday, and press releases as well. So I think it was covered in almost every newspaper in the state today.
Okay, well, I didn't receive that.
Mr. Wagasback.
Yeah, I would just echo some of the comments made by the superintendent that I think this is one of the most exciting things that we're doing right now. And, I'm very hopeful for some of the results we see from this pilot, and I think it has tremendous potential. I think whether you're dealing with a child that is going to stay in a mainstream classroom, or whether you're dealing with a child that is going to have special challenges that throughout their education process, early intervention and early education is a critical part of success in that. And the only thing I wanted to add to this is, as I look at the list of recipients that are going to be part of the initial pilot, I would encourage all of them to not just work collaboratively with the stakeholders we mentioned here, but each community may have other stakeholders that are good at other pieces of the puzzle. I'll give you one example. There is a facility in Baton Rouge here called the Emerge Center. It used to be called the Speech and Hearing Foundation. It is they deal with early intervention and early ABA therapies for kids on the autism spectrum, and have shown tremendous results. And so I just think as these pilots are going in place, different communities may have other types of centers like that. They're doing a really good job today in these communities, helping children at an early age, whether it be on special education or regular education or whatever. And I think it'd be good to encourage those that are participating in the pilot to seek out, reach out and develop a dialogue with entities like that in their area, because there may be some ideas or collaborations that could be baked into that curriculum that could really show some tremendous results for these kids as they enter the system. But anyway, just wanted to echo that this is very exciting, and I'm very hopeful for some of the outcomes we'll see out of this.
Thank you for those comments. We do have some speakers. I'll give board members one last chance after we listen to the speakers. Ms. Barrios, Lee Barrios, representing herself. Ms. Barrios, I'm not certain your microphone's on. If you double check.
Lee Barrios, St. Tammany Parish, retired. Mr. Wagaspack, you'll be happy to know at least one of those school districts that has been given the pilot is being totally transparent and collaborative. Early this morning, I sent a FOIA to both the Department of Ed and to St. Tammany for an extensive list of information about this, and I've already gotten it within a matter of a few hours, including the contract. The one question that they're not able to answer, so I would like to ask now is, and my concern is, of course, it's the part that it's going to play, or that the Common Core is going to play in it, based on my previous comments, but also the assessment tool, which they say hasn't been received yet. And I'm wondering, has that been developed? Who's going to develop it? Where is it going to come from?
Do you care to respond?
Sure. We have a public bid for an assessment tool to assess a child's learning and a child's development. We'll be piloting that tool.
And will that be aligned with the Common Core?
It's an early learning set of standards, so it is really in line with kindergarten preparation, not with the K-12 standards themselves.
Okay, and will you list those when those bids come in, and how will they be chosen? Who will determine that, BESE or LDE?
It's in conjunction with the state's bid process. Ultimately, the contract will come to BESE, but the selection is based on a matrix of factors, including cost, quality, and ability to design an assessment that meets the parameters. If there's only one that meets the parameters, then there's only one, vendor chosen. But if there are multiple, then we look at the cost.
And can you approximate when that will come to BESE for approval?
I don't remember the date on that, no. No, I'm happy to get it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Brooks, representing the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. This for SIT, not academic goals. Are there any other comments on this issue?
Well, I just want to more or less speak in line to what Ms. Barrios brought up, the assessment. So we will not have stakeholder input, because I do know earlier discussions we talked about assessments, and at that point in time no decision had been made, but I thought we would afford stakeholder input.
Well, there are a lot of things being piloted, and one of them is an assessment of a child's kindergarten readiness and their learning for that process. We're going to pilot at least one tool in addition to our skills checklist that we use when kids enter kindergarten. So we'll have those two tools still in use. We're going to pilot this tool and see how it works and how it, what works well and what doesn't work, and we're going to do that in the pilot circumstance. If by the end of the year it's clear that this is not a tool that works, then clearly we need to rebid and try to find something else that does. If it does work and it works for educators and others, then we might continue with it. So we have the option to, at any time during the pilot, say we're going to end this specific assessment tool and use another.
Okay, but my recollection, I didn't know that we identified an assessment.
We have not. It has to go through a public bid and compete a public competition process.
Oh my goodness. And no review and discussions, it's just who comes in with the low bid?
No, there's an RFP. The RFP outlines the parameters for the pilot, for the assessment, what the assessment must do. But what we're really looking for is then feedback from the actual people who have to use it every day, the educators, the parents, as well. And as they use it, they will give us a picture of, well, this is what we really need in an assessment to inform better classroom instruction. And if what they say is, this is perfect, then good. If they say it's not going to work, then we'll go back to the drawing board.
Any other comment? There's a motion and there's a second. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 4.2 on page 11. Consideration of a status report on the activities of the College and Career Readiness Commission. The department recommendation is to receive.
I believe someone requested this be pulled, and perhaps it was a speaker. There was someone that wanted to speak on this. Let's get a motion first to receive the item.
I make that motion.
A motion by Ms. Bofi. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gio. And I would like to invite Monica Candell, Stand for Children, forward.
Hi, I'm Monica Candell, Policy and Data Analyst with Stand for Children, Louisiana. Earlier this week, the LDE released the latest data on cohort graduation rates in Louisiana. It's to the credit of the educators across the state and to the state's educational leadership that these gains have become a reality. This is hard work. However, merely increasing the proportion of students with a high school diploma isn't enough. At the same time that Louisiana released its report of high school graduation rates, the Washington Post released a list of the top 1,900 most challenging high schools in the country. These were the high schools that presented rigorous coursework to their students, to all students. Louisiana had only 2 high schools listed among these. This is all to say that a greater number of high school diplomas is important, but we need to make sure that those high school diplomas actually mean something, that they are rigorously preparing our students for college and for high-wage careers. Louisiana has already begun taking important steps in this direction. In 2010, BESE adopted the Common Core state standards and accompanying assessments. In February, the LDE announced that the state's assessments and instructions would be aligned to Common Core by the upcoming academic year. The state has expanded access to advanced coursework through AP and IB classes, and the state is now requiring all students to take the ACT. These are all steps in the right direction, and the recommended changes to high school diplomas before you today build on those changes. These changes ensure that when our students graduate from high school, they will have options. They will have access to good options. They will be prepared for the 21st century workforce. And we're ready to support the diploma changes and the transition to Common Core in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you for comments. Any board member have a comment?
I can't resist, and certainly my comments are not intended to you, but rather to the state superintendent and BESE, with reference to requiring our students to take the ACT, and those students feeling anxiety, rebelling because they don't see the value in it. Some just simply refusing to take it, being rendered consequences. And I just think it's a travesty that we put that kind of pressure on our students and certainly on our school systems, because we have no control of people's actions. We can establish expectations, but at the same time, I cannot direct a child to complete the exam. While I can direct him, I have no control over the outcome. And in fact, in my school district, a student wrote profanity on the ACT exam, put it on Instagram, and of course the district was compelled to render a consequence. But I just think that while we can have establish those high expectations, we're putting a lot of pressure on our people, our students.
Well, I certainly respect that comment, and I think you're right. I think there is a lot of pressure right now, and I think we need to work to take some of the pressure off and make sure we're doing the best job we can supporting our kids and supporting our educators. I will tell you that in my mind there are 3 reasons why this is an important initiative. One, it aligns with the new standards that we're adopting. More importantly, 2, it sets a beacon at the end of the high school experience that all of us can aspire to. And 3, and we've already gotten emails and heard stories about kids who never have taken the ACT, never thought they were going to college, who actually have done very, very well on the ACT. And if that's happening for a number of kids, and all the research shows that it will, we think it's worth it. But you're right, Ms. Beebe, it's as with anything else, it's not without struggle, and I appreciate everything the educators are doing and the parents are doing to make it as worthwhile as possible.
Any additional comments? We have a motion to receive, and we have a second. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 4.3 on page 14. Consideration of the consolidation of the School and District Accountability Commission and the Committee of Practitioners. The department recommendation is to approve.
I make that motion.
There's a motion to approve by Ms. Bophy. Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Lee. I don't know if we have any comments or questions from members of the board.
Just a clarification, just the overall intent of it.
I can certainly give you my, we've had a long acting accountability commission in this state. At the same time, due to changes in federal policy, the superintendent had to develop a group that would deal with specific requests from the federal government in regard to some of our accountability measures that we use in our state. I thought, and others thought, this was somewhat duplicative, that we had two groups, in essence, with the same responsibilities, and that we should consolidate the two into one. And so we took the framework that the superintendent was working with his group and the framework of the Accountability Commission and merged them into a single entity, which in fact gives both groups a wider variety of issues to give input. And this group includes practitioners, it includes parents, a number of different categories, as you can see by the presentation. I don't know if that suffices as an explanation. Ms. Beebe.
Mr. Romer, let's talk about the composition of this committee, and I know you just said practitioners, parents, and so forth, but how many members, may I ask, and who makes that decision as to who serves on those committees? Because I've had an outreach from individuals who expressed an interest in serving on those committees.
Sure, I would reference page 15, Ms. Beebe, and I'd ask who's the appropriate person on your staff in case we need to answer questions.
Bridget Devlin.
Bridget, would you quickly brief members as to who are the members, what is the membership of the new committee, et cetera?
Sure. You would like the current membership of the...
Of what we're recommending today, what will be the membership makeup?
Sure, and you may have it in front of you. The proposal should be in your packet.
It is.
You will see that the new combined committee will have 15 members on it. 6 of them will be appointed by the state superintendent. 6 will be nominated by the BESE president with the approval of the board. And then 3 will be chosen by the board from a list that is given to you by the department. And each of those, there are 15 different roles. You can see in front of you educators, LEA administrators, charter school rep, non-public rep, school board member, parent, and each role falls into one of those 3 categories. And you'll see in front of you, you do not have names, you only have membership roles. We are asking for your approval of the proposal at this time, and then hope at the June meeting to actually bring you the superintendent's nominees, Mr. Romer's nominees, and then the list for the 3rd category.
And if I may, the nominees by the president will be from the recommendations of the board. So I will forward those to the board for approval with your input as to recommended membership in regard to the different categories that we have responsibility for. So any additional questions? We have a motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is on page 16, item 5.1, consideration of the repeal of bulletin.
Oh, and I apologize. I need to go back. Can we reconsider item 4.3? We did have a comment card that I failed to recognize. Can I have a motion to reconsider? Yeah, we have a motion and a second to reconsider. Ms. Barrios, you had entered a card for item 4.3, which I failed to recognize you on. If you wanted to still. The School and District Accountability Commission and Commission of the Committee of Practitioners.
Barrios, St. Tammany. I was wondering where the notices for those two committees or commissions could be found, where they put regularly, and where can I access the minutes, past minutes for those?
This will be a new committee. It's a very good question, which will operate much as the Accountability Commission did, which was a public meeting that involved public comment. It will be staffed by the DOE, and I'm certain they will be glad to have minutes of the meeting for public perusal.
And what I was referring to were the past minutes
Oh,
and the
I believe
meeting
they're
notices
online.
of those two committees.
They're online, I believe, and if not, if you can't not, we'll double check that, but they should be online.
Okay,
Our
I'll send your
office
mind.
sends out the agenda via listserv every meeting for that committee of practitioners.
Pardon me?
Our office sends out the agenda for that committee meeting every time they meet.
I never get those, but I get all
on
your
the
other.
listserv, and it's posted on the website.
Okay,
I
all
don't-
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Romer, if I may, since you opened it back up for discussion.
Yes, Ms. Beebe.
Okay, why should we have 6 for the superintendent to select? I mean, is there a magic number?
No, there's no magic number in that. It was, I think, important to have the superintendent. This is my opinion, okay? So you're welcome to obviously disagree with the opinion. We talked a great deal amongst the board officers and the superintendent regarding the makeup of this committee. And it was perceived two major issues kind of came to the surface from that. One, we wanted to make sure that the BESE board still named the majority of the board members, which we do under this recommendation. We named 9 of the 15 members. If the superintendent were to forward recommendations that we could not agree on, he would have to forward us new names from his list of nominees on 3 of his that he has to come to our approval. But at the same time, knowing that we want the superintendent to be certain to have a working group. This kind of came out of his practitioner group, which was a group of educational providers in the state to work closely with the superintendent on issues with accountability. That's what his group of practitioners was. We wanted to maintain his ability to have a strong influence on who those persons were as he crafted policy around the state. So I think, in my opinion, we reached a good balance here, which is that this board, this new committee still has to report to the BESE board. It's under our purview. We name the majority of the members, but yet the superintendent does get to name some members directly and nominate others. So I think it's a good balance. Again, this committee only gets to make recommendations to BESE. They don't get to have final approval of policy. That will still have to come to BESE. But I think we achieved a good balance here in what we're trying to achieve. And obviously people may have a different thought, but I thought in trying to combine the two groups into a working group, this was a good balance.
Well, I appreciate your view, but I personally have a different view in that perhaps he should have a limited number with more diversity and those from us, nominations from the board. And I can appreciate you did indicate that we would have a voice, but ultimately you would be the decision maker. Am I correct?
Well, you'll have to vote. I mean, if you were to come with me to recommendations and I forward them to the board for your approval as BESE members on this committee, this board has to approve the recommendations I make. So if I presented a board list that was not acceptable, you would have the chance to say, we disagree with that nominee. So it's listed as the board president, but that is something that I would simply forward to the board for approval.
So at some point, will there be a transparent process where if there are nominees from
Absolutely.
this board, then you will identify all nominees?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I will invite each of you to make nominations. So, any further questions? We need to renew the motion to approve this item. Motion by Mr. Lee, seconded by Ms. Bofi. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is on page 16, item 5.1, consideration of the repeal of Bulletin 1179, Driver Education, Traffic Safety, and Administrative Guide for Louisiana Schools, The department recommendation is to approve the repeal as a notice of intent.
I motion that we approve the repeal.
The motion by Ms. Bolte, seconded by Mrs. Orange Jones, I believe.
Second.
Any comment or question? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 5.2 on page 39. Consideration of the repeal of Bulletin 1934, Starting Points Preschool Regulations. The department recommendation is to approve the repeal as a notice of intent.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Approved by motion approved by Ms. Moranti, seconded by Mr. Lee. Any questions or comments?
I would just say we have a number of items relative to early childhood, and so I just appreciate the superintendent talking to us about them.
Sure. This is a program that existed many years back, Starting Points. I'm sure many of you worked with it and remember it. The program was the forerunner to LA Forward, but it no longer exists. So there need not be a bulletin to govern a program that no longer exists.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comment? There's a motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is on page 43, item 5.3. Consideration of repealing Bulletin 105, Louisiana Content Standards for Programs Serving 4-Year-Old Children, and the creation of Bulletin 136, Louisiana Standards for Early Childhood Care and Education Programs Serving Children birth to 5 years. The department recommendation is to approve the repeal of Bulletin 105 as a notice of intent and approve the creation of Bulletin 136 as a notice of intent.
I move to approve both.
Motion by Ms. Bofi, seconded by Mr. Lee. Any question or comment?
I have questions about where the new standards came from.
Sure. And if I could just provide comment as well, and our staff can answer detailed questions. And thank you for the opportunity. This board started the commissioning of new standards for birth through 5 a couple of years back. And so over the course of the last 2 years, the department, working with school systems across the state, have been in the process of essentially revising our early learner standards. The standards are applicable for all students. They're applicable for students with disabilities as well as for English language learners. They reflect cognitive domains as well as socio-emotional and physical development. So unlike our K through 12 standards, these are not academic standards alone. These are also reflect cognitive and behavioral development. They establish, really for the first time, a common set of descriptors for what students should be expected to achieve prior to entering kindergarten, and thus they are the anchor of our early childhood reforms. But at the same time, they recognize that children's development is fluid, and that unlike, say, an end-of-course test, for example, that says by the end of this grade you shall have attained this level of content mastery, they are variable as child's, and they're not contingent on a specific age level, for example, or you must have achieved this by this point. Assessments that we discussed earlier in terms of what students in the network of early childhood care and education would be expected to achieve are going to be modeled on these standards. But again, the standards are not really just academic standards. They're also cognitive standards, and they look quite different in that respect. And socio-emotional, they look quite different in that respect from what a K through 12 standard looks like. They have been presented in various forms to the board over the course of the last year as they've been in development. We've worked for more than a year with national experts, with practitioners in the field, including our school systems, our Head Start organization here in the state, our Child Care Association. And we've reviewed drafts with all of those parties over the last year as well to finally bring it to this point of ratification. And obviously BESE has been one of those groups that has seen the standard as well. They will be used in the pilots as the kind of base description of what centers will actually be responsible for doing day to day. But again, these are not just pre-K standards, these are birth to 5 standards. So they spell out services even for those centers that are not providing pre-kindergarten, but are providing services for students who are 1, 2, or 3 years old, children who are 1, 2, or 3 years
We do have some speakers. I will come back to board members. If you feel you need to make another comment or have a question, Sandra Myers from the Louisiana Head Start Association.
Good afternoon. I want to compliment on the
Ms. Myers, if you don't mind checking your
It is on.
Okay, that's better.
Maybe I wasn't
You have to
close.
pull it really close.
Sorry.
It's not. And then also, please, I hate to say this, please state your name. So we'll
I will do that.
Okay.
I want to thank the board members who expressed an interest in asking questions about early childhood. Because we've all been in classrooms, but not all of us have been in daycare centers or Head Start programs. So all of you are not real knowledgeable about early childhood, and so I think that that's important that you ask that question. I am Sandra Myers. I am an administrator of the Head Start program with one of the school systems in South Louisiana. My background is that I have 40 years in education, 18 years as an elementary school teacher, 5 years as an elementary school principal with pre-K to 8, and 17 years as a Head Start director with the school system. I would like to say that we welcome in the Head Start community the standards that are currently being worked on, and we have had a share in them, especially with the Bright Start Committee. I do want to share some thoughts and emphasis from the Head Start community. First of all, the proposed Louisiana standards on one of the pages states it parallels the 256-page Head Start performance standards and the 100-page academic standards that are now part of Head Start's requirements for all grantees to assess children and measure and analyze those. In this document, in section 111A, there is a statement that there are a multitude of guidelines, and there are, and Part C actually cites the Head Start learning standards as a parallel format to the Louisiana Early Learning Standards. I have a few requests of the BESE committee. Head Start has, since its inception, undergoes changes at least every 5 years when it must be reauthorized. In the last few years, the changes have included research-based assessment required for analysis for child growth, and also a requirement for bachelor's degrees for teachers and credentials for teacher assistants. In Senate Bill 130, there is a bill that focuses on the tiered system for licensing different agencies. Head Start is included in Tier 3 as a child care agency, but from what I've shared, Head Start is no longer a child care setting, but rather an education setting. We are, by mandate from Congress, required to prepare children for kindergarten and actually have the same kinds of learning standards you have in this packet. Yes.
I hate to cut you short. We do have a time limit.
Yes, I'm on the last sentence.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds great.
And so I would ask you to look at this document and this bill that is in the House of Education Committee, which will eventually impact you, and get to know it. And I would also like to recommend that since you have not been in daycare or Head Start, that you would attend a Head Start program and see what goes on there. And an example of what you asked on the skills and that Superintendent White said is that the gamut is much broader in early childhood for social emotional skills. For example, how many of you know what a separation skill is in a child? It means that that child is able to separate from mom without screaming and crying and clawing. You know, those are the kind of standards you don't see in your education. So if you're responsible now from birth to 12th grade, then I think it behooves you to become familiar with early childhood standards and visit all early childhood settings. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Bovee. Ms. Myers, board member had a question, if you don't mind.
So I just want to make sure that I understand that you are that you feel good about what we're looking at approving today to go under a notice of intent, which means we'll get feedback from the public. So you feel good about the decision that we're making today, but that you're asking us to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature relative to future actions. Is that right?
And especially in licensing. You know, for
in
example,
licensing. Okay, and if you can give us the bill number, that helps.
It's Senate Bill 130. It went to the House, the Health and Welfare Committee, and it is now pending in the Education Committee. Okay. And it's not a long document, but it creates tiers, and actually Head Start really does not fall into those tiers. It falls more into the education area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shira Spiegel, I believe. And represent Students for Education Reform.
Hi, my name is Shira Spiegel. I'm a student at Tulane University. I'm a member of Students for Education Reform. I might not be a professional. I don't really have any credentials, but I'm trying to get involved in all this. And I'm actually studying early childhood education at Tulane. And so I've spent a lot of time recently going into a whole bunch of different types of schools and also learning all about child development. And I do support these new the standards about social, emotional, all that. I think it's really great that early childhood students are assessed on that, not just math and science, because they don't know that. One thing that I want to mention, I don't know exactly what the assessment is of this, because I was recently in a school in New Orleans, and they were testing kindergartners. They gave kindergartners a math test essentially, and the teachers read out the questions, but the kindergartners they just can't take those types of tests. And you could tell the students were getting frustrated, the teachers who were getting frustrated, and everyone was just, tensions were high because they were trying to give kindergartners a math test. So I don't know exactly what the assessments are for this, and I wanted to mention this about 3.1 also when you were talking about assessments. I don't know exactly. So I just like cautioning people against trying to do formal assessments of early childhood students, because it just doesn't work that way. That's just sort of my 2 cents that I wanted to share.
Thank you. Lee Barrios. Okay, and we had one other who did not wish to speak but wanted to turn in a card for support, and it was Vicki Krutzer, if I said that correctly. Do you want to speak?
I do.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It was circled, no comments.
I'm sorry. No,
Sorry.
I just wanted to comment.
Mm-hmm.
We in Monroe City have been very fortunate, and we support our pre-K. We fund it out of our own budget. I would encourage the BESE to consider in your MFP funding, we need to fund pre-K. I also would ask you, I will piggyback on what the young lady just said. Your assessments of pre-K, we've got them coming at all levels, and y'all know that. We can't, and children learn at different. Sometimes they're ready, sometimes they're not, and we don't need to penalize them. May I ask the superintendent, how does the early childhood community pilot program, how does it align with this bulletin?
I'll answer the question.
Thank you.
Really in 2 core ways. Number one, with respect to the assessment question, and I appreciate both of you raising it. We certainly don't have what you would call a standardized test for 4-year-olds. At the same time, we are going to, at greater scale, provide a formative tool for assessing the socio-emotional, cognitive, and pre-academic development of 4-year-olds across the state. And we're in a bidding process, as I articulated to Ms. Hill and Ms. Beebe. But ultimately, that's what the specifications on the RFP say. But really, this is a professional development instrument, as much as anything else. And right now, we know that there's not just inequity in terms of what students receive in our early childhood system, but there's inequity across what adults are receiving. And that's not so much a Head Start versus child care versus pre-kindergarten question. It's a site-to-site question, no matter that. We know there are places where professionals are truly being developed as professionals. There are places where people are not learning to teach. And we need to change that by providing equitable access to professional development on these standards. And really the network concept is key in that. I'll just give you an example. I was in Orleans Parish. In Orleans Parish, we have the Mahalia Jackson Center, which now Superintendent Lafayette Pat Cooper very wisely thought of as a community center, not just for students, but also for educators to go and be educated on how to educate for our earliest learners. And that kind of plan is what we need in every district, and that's really the core of these standards.
So that's what it is. And, well, if you were not here, but many of you board members, Walter, you remember over in West Feliciana, they had pre-K and followed them all the way. So Lloyd Lindsay did that and had the Head Start program. My concern is you're judging we school districts, public schools, with our pre-K program and what we're doing, and the other Head Start and some of those other early childhood centers don't have to have their certified teachers, don't have to follow the same curriculum. So I would encourage all of you BESE board members, as she said, you need to get out and see, and please judge us all apples to apples. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Hill, did you have a comment?
I have a question.
Yes.
And I think, Superintendent, you allude to it in reference to the social and emotional component. And I know you said that you guys are looking at various instruments to see what, is there a team involved? Or I'm just trying to get a clear understanding of how we're going to move, because that's a very critical part when you're looking at the age group, especially of children. And this is very critical. So can you elaborate on what is the next step? Are we going to form a advisory council or a task force team of individuals that specialize in working with that population and dealing with those type of issues to come up with an assessment? Because I think even though we're looking more at the numbers as far as the data, but what's more critical is the social and emotional piece when you're dealing with that population of children. So can you elaborate how we're going to move forward?
And just tell me how we're going to, I understand the topic, the socio-emotional development of children, but how are we going to move forward on what
initiative? As far as implemented into the assessment, you said that you guys are looking at various instruments.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So that's what I mean.
So each of the networks will start with what I'd call a design process. They're going to put in motion a number of pillars. One of them will be assessing a child's development. One of them will be early screening for disabilities. They will work with a department official who's been appointed to facilitate that planning process. That planning will involve local Head Start, local child care, and local pre-kindergarten to ensure that across centers, after we've made sure that every child is accounted for, that we have a plan to provide those services for each child, and it's coordinated across those centers. We'll also, as I said, have professional development plans in place, and we will monitor their implementation over time, and we'll take notes as to what's working and what's not. Ultimately, those systems that work best will become systems that we will try to grow statewide, best practices that we will try to grow statewide as we try to expand the pilots to not just be 15 pilot districts, but 70 districts.
Okay, so when we look at the overall outcome, when you guys are doing the actual evaluation of how these pilot programs are performing, what weight would that social and emotional component, how much will we look at that area versus the academic piece? Is it going to be 50-50, 40-60?
No, significant. Now, that we're not going to evaluate it based on, are your children developing socio-emotionally better than others, for example. That's not the way we're going to evaluate it. But we're going to evaluate based on what worked and what didn't. So in other words, it's not saying we're comparing one parish to the next. We're evaluating what worked and what didn't. The way we'll do that is we have an evaluation team. That evaluation team will be embedded within each network, and they will basically observe with each teacher what's working and what's not. And with respect to assessments, that's exactly the way we're going to do it. We're going to watch and observe the child being assessed. We're going to monitor the child's progress over time. We're going to say, this is what this network did that worked. This is what this one did that didn't work.
Okay. Well, I'd like to request to be a part of that assessment team or observation team. I would just like to be a part of that.
Sure, you'd be welcomed into the pilots anytime.
Okay.
Any additional comments? We have a motion and we have a second. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 5.4 on page 149. Consideration of revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices, to add the end of course U.S. History Test scale score ranges for the 4 achievement levels. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
I'll make the motion, but I have questions.
Motion by Ms. Bophy to approve, a second by Mr. Lee. Ms. Bophy.
I just want to know how these ranges are determined.
The cut scores that are recommended we have to do now, and this is a little bit of a difficult situation because the tests we have a small number of tests that were taken this winter, because it is in some cases, not many, but it's a semester-long class. In many cases, it's a year-long class, but in some cases, it's semester-long. So typically, we would set the cut scores after having looked at all of the assessments. But we look at the assessment scores to establish, statistically some sense of where you have norms and where you have outliers. We then walk through a process where we have a teacher survey and a standard setting workshop that basically allows us to classify students into achievement levels based on a set of policy definitions. So in other words, we can say, okay, here is a descriptor of what a high level is. Here's what same as is happening on the PARCC test, for example. We then look at the results and we ask teachers to help us classify each student within those descriptors, and then we look across all kids and all responses to that survey and in that workshop to establish reasonable norms for what the score should be. After all of the tests have been taken this year, we can go back and revise those cut scores if necessary. But we think that in order to release those scores now, because kids really do need to know now and families need to know whether or not they passed, because it's a graduation related test, that we need to provide the cut scores to schools now.
Mr. Knockham, then Ms. Beebe.
I was just curious on the scores. I see the numerical values, and in past documents and stuff, I've seen on each level, I guess you would say, the efficiency and proficiency in those areas. Is that included somewhere, that whenever you do get your score back, or in the bulletin to see maybe where these teachers or students can improve, or areas that they may need to focus on more to improve the scores? I'd like to make that suggestion to maybe be added eventually, if once more scores come in and can find those maybe. And I know some areas it's all across the test, but maybe to see certain areas that are lacking and stuff.
That's great. So it's a report, effectively, that allows the school is that what you're suggesting?
I was just asking. I was asking if this is where it would be, or in a report.
Oh, it would be in a report.
Okay.
Sorry, it would be in the report back to the school in terms of what questions were answered correctly, what questions were answered incorrectly across the school. Yes, that would be in a report.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that was part of it.
So
Thank you.
my question is, Mr. Romer,
Yes.
Superintendent White. So these scores are derived from the fall semester, those within
Yes.
the group?
They're derived from a calculation of the average of working through the workshopping process as well as through the teacher survey process.
Okay, so we're just getting this information.
Yes, ma'am.
We're approving, and that's to be effective tomorrow.
It would be effective as soon as we approve it after tomorrow, and it would be then retroactively applied to the tests that were taken in the winter.
But is that fair, board members? I mean, when I play a game, I want to know the rules going in.
I agree with you, unfortunately, on assessments, because you never quite know until after a test has been taken, after the whole, in order to be safe and fair. You really do have to wait until after the whole assessment has been taken at least once to say, okay, we understand really how it's going to play out. Now, before a test, no doubt about it, you field test. So I can say, okay, here's an individual question on the test, and I'm going to test how well this test question works. But ultimately, there's no replacement for the reality of the whole test. And so now we're testing every single student who took US on this assessment. Well, you don't really know how everyone's going to do on the entire test until everyone has to take it in a high-stakes setting with accountability, as you mentioned before, with the ACT. This is the first time that's happened. So with any new test, after it's been taken the first time for accountability, we really do need to go back and see, okay, how did everybody do? And based on that, we're going to establish this cut score. It's the only fair way to do it to students, because if you try to set the scores before you've ever administered the test, you risk setting the bar too high or too low for the students, because frankly you don't have the basis that you need to set those cuts in the first place.
Okay, but these scores are derived from the fall test administration.
Yes.
Okay, here we are, the spring semester. But this is the score that we will apply. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then my concern is, once we get all of the scores together, then you would set your range. Aren't we acting prematurely here?
Well, we feel like we really need to provide this for those students who took this test in the winter. I don't know what the exact number is, Jessica, in terms of the volume of students. It's not many, but we have a real concern that if we don't, Ms. Beebe, give them this information now, you're effectively precluding them from, say, enrolling again in U.S. next fall if they didn't pass this test. And for many kids, this test has graduation implications. So we think that we need to give this to them now.
Ms. Bofi, and then I'll come back. Thank you.
I just want to find out why English 3 is underlined. I don't know if this is a technical error or if we haven't. It's a technical error. So, do we need to do something about it now?
Do you know what? I don't know what.
You're referencing page 150. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We don't have new ranges for English 3, so I'm assuming that we are just making changes to U.S. history, and so we're not adding English 3 to this bulletin. Is that correct?
We are not adding anything. The board has already approved performance standards for English 3. I can get with the staff to clarify whether it's just mistakenly underlined because they were getting rid of the "and" earlier, or whether previously when you approved the performance standards for English 3, which are listed in greater detail in a separate section, it was just that we forgot to name English 3 in this sentence.
Okay.
But in either case, you've already approved them.
So you would rather wait on us to make any changes?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I will come to you, Mr. Knockhand. If you don't mind, I'll let the speakers speak, and then I'll come back. Wayne Free.
Wayne Free, Louisiana Association of Educators. I'd like to ask a question, and depending upon the answer, then make my presentation. Okay. Are there line item analysis and any way for a teacher to use these tests to determine what are the weaknesses that are going on and how would they improve it in this test?
You mean, do they get a report subsequent to the test regarding their students' proficiency?
Regarding all of the content and where the students fell in a particular content area, line item analysis.
Yes, we do give them an analysis of their, at a school level, of students' weaknesses, strengths, and so on the test.
Saying this area was strong, this area was weak, and so on.
Yes.
One of the, in my past history, I've been involved in the 40 years in all kinds of changes, including this process in Kentucky when we worked on, developed, and went through the process. There were lots of strengths, particularly when you were able to get line item analysis and a clear understanding of the strengths and the weaknesses in that class. There were also lots of weaknesses, and the number one weakness was grading any student on one test. The more you put pressure on students on one test, the more you ensure that some will not perform. And the more you do that and tell a teacher that their evaluation of the student has no judgment whatsoever on whether or not that student should get a passing grade on this particular class, the more you force people to teach the narrowness of the content in that one test and not the entire process within there. Probably the worst mistake that has been made is to not understand that process. Anytime you make one test, the final analysis, no matter what occurs, you narrow the curriculum, narrow what's taught, and harm the overall performance of students. And I would strongly recommend you vote no.
Mr. Free, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
And I know the academic setting's different, but there are certainly college courses where the final is everything. I'm just curious as to your opinion on the difference on, because I certainly wouldn't consider some of those courses too narrow. Now, there's a great deal of pressure involved with that, but I'm curious as to your thought on that.
I made high enough on my GRE to get 2 people into graduate school. On my advanced GRE in educational administration, I made in the top 8% in the nation. I watched people perform much better than me who couldn't do that at all in the class and in other places, because I do well on tests. Other people do not. I don't care whether it's the college level, the high school level, or the LEAP level. When that is the only process you make for a final decision, you're making a mistake. Let me give you a specific example. Having sat there and helped design these tests in Kentucky before it was developed, I pointed out during the process that the way we were designing the test was going to hurt the performance of our students in certain ways because teachers would narrow that curriculum. Within 4 years, exactly what I predicted happened. And we had students who were having trouble here because the teachers were going to be evaluated based upon the student's evaluation of a test that did not cover everything. And when you have 25 questions, you don't cover everything.
I appreciate it.
We try to do the written process as well, but evaluating the written process creates some difficulties. So there were no easy answers. My comment is very clear. When you have one test that is limited in scope and ability, and that's the only judgment of that individual, whether it's at the college or attorney or any other level, you are making a mistake.
Appreciate you answering my question. Thank you. Lee Barrios. Okay. Mr. Nalcan.
Yes, sir. I just had to going back to kind of taking a step back on the scores. I'm just still kind of confused. I understand that this winter or the fall scores were a very small amount, but I have several friends, for instance, that are taking this course all year long. So, in my opinion, should we, at the end of this, after they take the test this year, reevaluate those scores to determine these cut scores and compare them at least to say as a larger number, because I think you get a more qualitative answer through numbers, through more. I'm just curious, and I would suggest also, suggestion coming from a student, knowing that my score is determined on just one semester, and if I'll pass or fail, when I'm still in the class a whole year or taking it this semester, I think that it would be fair, and we would understand as students, and I'm sure Peyton can agree with me, that if we have an assessment on a full year, you take in consideration the winter, the fall, the spring, and all those students that took it this year, the 11th, I think it's 11th grade you take it, the 11th grade students all together, I feel much more, it'd be fair, I guess, to say, in our opinion, as students. So I just want to make that suggestion, and we should consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have gotten clarity regarding page 150. I believe English 3 should not be underlined. Is that correct?
I just pulled it up on the bulletin, and it's in there. It's in there.
So we're going to assume it's not underlined. If we need to correct it tomorrow, we will. But for the sake of this, English 3 is not underlined, therefore indicating that's not new language. Any further comments or questions?
Yes, I just wanted to make a statement in reference to Mr. Free and the young man that's sitting next to me. Yesterday when I was at Dutchtown Senior High School, I had the opportunity to meet with 20 students. And these students are students that are currently taking AP or honors classes. And one of the things that they said to me that was so interesting, that stood out to me, was that they said that they have taken so many tests and that they're tested out. But not only that, that they're not, the information that they're obtaining is not for them to absorb it and then apply it. It's for them to memorize it and just pass this test. So it's just like a checklist for them. And so when they said that to me, I had a real issue with that, because in their mind, they're focused on, I have to pass this test to either graduate or go to the next level, instead of actually being engaged in the classroom or actually trying to absorb the information and then apply it. Because we know in real life, we're going to take issues and then we have to apply what we have learned. And these kids telling me, no, Ms. Hill, we're doing this because we know we have to take this end of the year course exam, we have to take this test, and we're going to memorize this information. It's like a checklist, and that the teachers are so stressed because they know that based on the outcome of this test is determining if they're going to have a job or not in reference to their evaluation. And so I'm trying to figure out a way, how can we decrease some of that anxiety? How can we more mainly engage the students to be more engaged in the classroom than actually trying to just memorize information to pass a test that's going to determine an outcome from a teacher evaluation of whether he or she has a job or not. So could you please, how can we do that? Because that's very disturbing to me.
Well, I think that tests are only as good as you, as the things that they measure. And, you know, if you have a test that's just about memorization and regurgitation, that's not a good test. And, you know, tests have served an important purpose in that a lot of kids are reading and writing and graduating at higher levels than they were 20 years ago. Tests have served an important accountability purpose in our state. But we're now at a point where we can have tests that actually do, I think, measure the things that you're describing, Ms. Hill, which is real-world thinking for yourself, which is the ability to judge a critical thinking problem and assess an answer that you can develop evidence to support. You know, those kinds of skills, the new assessments will measure in ways that the old assessments never could. And I think that if we have an assessment we believe in, then we won't have the problem you're describing. That's what we're working toward.
Thank you. We have a motion, and we've discussed this item, I think, to a great deal. We have a motion and a second. I will remind everyone the motion is going to assume that English 3 is not underlined unless we're corrected tomorrow. So there's a motion and there's a second. Is there any objection to the motion?
Can I make one comment for the record? Ms. Bofi was a social studies teacher, not an English teacher when she won Teacher of the Year, but I think her performance today, she might qualify for both subjects.
You should wait till I recognize you, Mr. Wagenspach, before you speak. Is there any objection?
Object.
There's two objections, Ms. Hill and Ms. Beebe. Next item.
Next item is on page 151, item 5.5. Consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding the accountability policy. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Can we have a motion to approve? Can we have a presentation by the department?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, members, as you know, we are going through a process of transitioning to different standards for what students are expected to achieve in our state. And to the discussion with Mr. Nakhan and Ms. Hill, that means that we are also transitioning to different assessments of whether or not students learned that material and those skills in our state. Well, anytime that we change the tests, we're going to have to also change the consequences, or at least look at whether or not we still have fair consequences of those tests. That means school-level accountability based on tests. It means district-level accountability. It means principal and teacher-level accountability. And it means student accountability through diplomas and promotion. Over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, members, we will be bringing you policy changes related to the consequences related to the new tests and to the new standards. Teacher and principal accountability will be one of them. We're not going to deal with that today. We'll do that next fall. The same will be true of graduation requirements, which we will address with you next fall. Today we want to address with you school and district accountability. And we want to address that one first because, as you know, this board changed the school and district accountability policies about a year and change ago in order to begin to adapt to the Common Core state standards. Today's change is a relatively minor one to get us through this year of transition. As you know, the accountability formula to determine letter grades for schools and for districts this fall is going to be a different program, a different formula than it was last fall. after consulting with superintendents and after consulting with leaders of schools, we have come to think that a better way in this 1 year of transition to communicate the letter grades is to provide 2 letter grades. So that you're both saying, okay, how did you do when compared to last year on last year's system? And how did you do on this new system this year? Schools could earn top gains either way. Consequences related to the Recovery School District would be, or our scholarship program or other choice programs, would be related to the new letter grade. And I think it's worth saying we don't think there's actually going to be much variation from last year. We think a B last year is very likely to be a B this year. We think C and A and so on too, and we've done the simulations to show that. But we still think it's really important that the public see an apples-to-apples comparison of last year to this year. And the way to do that is to use last year's system. On the other hand, per this board's policy, we also think it's important to start a new formula. And that means starting a new system this year, thus making this 1 year a 2-letter grade year under this proposal. We think it's the fair way to do it. We think it's the clear way to do it. We think it's the transparent way to do it to the public. Mr. Chairman, I'll close my comments with that.
Okay. Do we have questions from BESE members? Ms. Beebe?
Mr. White, I can disagree respectfully with a comment you made with regard to the accountability system. There would likely not be that much change. In fact, in St. Martin Parish, we took a couple of schools and we applied last year's student performance, and we backed out using the current accountability formula. Some schools decreased by 20 points or more. And we certainly communicate. I think it's a wonderful idea to communicate the differences to the public so they will have a better understanding. I will also say that once, we're dealing with perceptions. Once, we're going to release the two scores, which will, I can appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, but it's still going to lend to negative perceptions, particularly when we know already for those school systems who have applied the new accountability formula, we're going to see a decline in student achievement. And then going back with the weighted formula, I think it was 2010, we were at 65%. So are we going to revert back to 65%, or are we now at 75% in the calculation? It was 65, we had to go to the 5-point intervals. 2010, we were at like 65%, and then you had the next level where you had to go by 5 points. And so are we going to revert back? What measure are you going to use to determine?
I don't know what you're referring to, Ms. Beebe, on 65%. I don't know what that is.
In applying the formula, like we had a score of 65%, and we had to increase our performance by 5%.
Oh, you're talking about the graduation rate.
Yes.
And a threshold for the graduation rate, at which point there is a bonus, right? Well, the formula is new, and the formula that was passed last February or March by this board does not include a graduation rate bonus any longer. I think that's exactly why it's important to think about a letter grade based on the old methodology, so you have an apples-to-apples comparison, and a letter grade based on the new methodology, so that you have the new system. That's why it's fair. To the question of the letter grade translation, of course there'll be some schools that vary year to year. That happens every year. But in the overall, our model shows that schools are going to be constant. Also, I've offered, as you know, in the superintendent newsletter, Jessica can walk any district through the simulations that we've done, and I'm happy to do that with St. Martin, of course. So, but we think that for these purposes, having the 2-letter grade system is fair, because it shows how would you have done on the old methodology, how would you have done on the new methodology. During the transition, it seems like the fair way to do it.
I'd like to hear from other BESE members. Does anyone, obviously you don't agree with my assessment of things, so you're agreeable to the 2-letter grade?
I will speak. I can't speak for others, and I don't know if others want to speak. I certainly think there should end up with one letter grade, and I think that's what we'll end up with. I think that's the ideal world for clarity and simplicity and to not create confusion. But certainly in the transition, at the request, quite frankly, of many LEAs around the state, they wanted there to be a transition period so that there was a clear comparison using the old method alongside the new method. I mean, that's my opinion. That's what I heard, and I certainly support that during this transition period. I don't know if any other member cares to.
This is just for 1 year, isn't it? The two-letter grade.
This is just for that 1 year, yes. And I believe the bulletin reflects that. This is just be for the fall of 2013. Yeah.
Well, as a follow-up, Mr. Romer, what I have heard from my constituents is that we delay the implementation of a letter grade so that we can, because we have embraced a lot of initiatives, and it has been they have been quite overwhelming. So, if we're going to do anything, I think at best, we should take the position that we delay the implementation of a letter grade.
Thank you. Any other comment? We do have some speakers. Sean Fleming, Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of BESE. I'm Sean Fleming. I'm with the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. I'm sure my council will weigh in during public comment on all the assessments as they relate to students with disabilities, developmental disabilities. What I just handed you is the ranking, the top and bottom ranking of schools from 2011. The one page has the top-ranked schools. The other side of the page has the bottom-ranked schools. I'd like to just bring your attention to the column on the far right, which indicates that 75% of your top-ranked schools are selective admission schools. That is, they basically don't include very many, if any, students with disabilities, particularly students with developmental disabilities. And when you flip it over, even though some of the schools that are not marked as alternative schools are actually exclusively designated for students with disabilities. I want to make it clear we're not advocating for segregated schools. I want to point out, now I've pointed this out to you all previously, that your accountability structure incentivizes segregation. This is the strongest evidence I have for that to show you that if a school has less students with disabilities, their scores are lower. If a school sets itself up with less students with disabilities, they're going to be at the top of your ranking. It does cause other problems in terms of you have all these schools marked Fs that, by my understanding, would be designated for school takeover. And I've brought to y'all attention before the inequity in funding that a school would have to receive those students. They would not receive an adequate amount of funding if those parents chose to leave those schools. So that the incentive is not enabling the entire structure to operate as it should, in my opinion. I strongly urge y'all, as y'all are looking at the school accountability, to look at student composition within the school. Y'all want to compare apples to apples, and if you're comparing the apples of a school with no students with disabilities to schools with typical proportions of students with disabilities, you're not comparing the same thing. And you're basically telling districts it's better to segregate and move kids into segregated settings. Thank you.
Can I ask questions?
Certainly.
I'm going to see if the president will allow it. Oh, well, he's not paying attention.
Ms. Buffy.
Thank you. So I'm listening for a solution, because we've talked about, and then today all day long talked about very complex problems, and so I'm listening for a solution, and I might have heard one, and I want to see if I'm right, and if not, I want you to offer other ones to us. But we're charged with achieving quality for our students. We want to achieve quality for our students. And in order to get to that quality, we have to know where we're starting, and we have to make goals for where we end up. So in your mind, is a solution a more, I don't know, maybe a more complex accountability where we're providing more information? I mean, where's the solution? Because we can't give up on figuring out where our schools are.
Can I offer just a quick note?
Sure.
Maybe to add to what Mr. Fleming says. I don't think it's an either or. I think on one hand, you can't give up on the idea that there's absolute quality versus not, because the minute you do that and you say everything's relative, you're giving up on success for everybody. On the other hand, if you don't honor progress, you create bad incentives. I agree with Mr. Fleming. We've started, and I think this has been undercovered by the media and others, but this new accountability formula, it has an incentive based on progress among the lowest, all students below grade level. Meaning literally we are saying those schools that make progress with those students below grade level will actually receive significant points for that. And at the same time, the core formula is still based on the status. How well did kids do in that school? So we're moving down this road. I think we should, this board has made adjustments to the accountability formula every year, small adjustments to slowly raise the bar gradually. This has been going back 15 years. I think if we take that approach on this progress-based bonus structure, we should look at it, see how well it works, see how well schools actually react to it, focusing on learners who unfortunately are in great part children with special needs. I don't say that happily, but that is the fact of our current situation, and see if it works.
Thank you.
Mr. Garvey. Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Fleming, if that's okay. You talked about the selective schools, and I'm wondering if you're meant to imply, and I'm not saying that you did, that's why I'm asking, did you mean to imply that the selective schools have no special education students in them?
No, sir. Do y'all want me to answer Ms. Balfe's question first, or his question?
Why don't you take them in the order you're pleased to do?
This is faster.
Okay.
And okay. The selective admissions, this is a document that is on the department's website, or it was. I'm not sure. Sometimes I have trouble finding things, just because of the restructuring. If you go look at the composition of these schools, and I've looked at most of these, and you can take the top ones, they're magnet schools. They have like 0.6% of their students with disabilities. I don't know if I have access to the current data on the breakout by student classification to determine whether they have students with developmental disabilities or not, but I can pretty much guarantee probably not. I think it would be a fair assessment to say they have very few, if any, students with, be intellectual disabilities.
You think 0.6?
0.6 is what I've seen on less than 1% of their student populations have kids with disabilities. I think y'all should look at that. I think y'all should really understand and when you look at the backside, a lot of those are 100%. I mean, it's very clear. This is the clearest way I can show you, the correlation or the impact. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Balfe, that's an excellent question, and it is very complex. I don't think there's an easy answer. I do think that your accountability structure should take into account the student composition of each school. Right now, and be clear, my council advocates for students with disabilities to have fair access to all of your school choice programs. And right now, between the financial end of it and the accountability end, there are incentives for that not to happen. What I'm addressing right now is the accountability end. The first thing I think you should require is that, and I'm going to address this in your next meeting, when you look at admissions of schools, commending y'all on having a unified admission standard for schools, for type 2 charter schools and other schools in Orleans, but y'all don't have that statewide. So schools should let in any student who applies, regardless of their disability, and they should not be able to remove those students if it's a violation of federal law, which it pretty much is if they do. So that's the first thing. Then you do have, by statute, some schools are allowed to impose academic standards for admissions still. So it puts y'all in a little bit of a quandary with determining whether you're going to weight a school that has already pre-selected students based on their academic standards and measure them on the same standard you're measuring everybody else by. My recommendation would be to not do that, to impose higher standards or other means to determine, you know, what it means for them to reach standards.
So you're saying, depending on their composition, depending on their student composition, to weight, or to say, if this is your composition and this is your expectation, to have like a direct requirement for composition relative to expectation. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's more complicated than that, because I would not want to lower the expectation for people to graduate.
That's getting us in a dangerous area. Right.
And so that does come into play. But when the state is basically allowing schools to accept kids based on their academic performance going in the door, and then y'all are coming back and saying, we're going to measure you against academic standards, guess what we're going to get? Mm-hmm. They're doing great. Is it because they're doing great or they're selected well? And I do think y'all can do a subset of schools that, if that's going to continue, which I don't advocate that continues, but if it is beyond y'all reach, that's a legislative issue, then y'all shouldn't measure them the same. Y'all should recognize the differences between those schools. The other part is, one more thing, real quick.
Yes, please.
Is the entire structure is built exclusively on academic standards. I found it interesting that someone from the early, intervention brought up other indicators that indicate success. I tell you, with my own children and with every child I see, I want them to succeed. I know it's important for them to succeed academically. The other parts of them are much more important. And what this is telling me is, if you don't succeed academically, you're deemed a failure. And I don't think that's always true. And it comes into play when we're looking at whether some IEP goals, some social goals are being met for a lot of our kids, which enable them to keep the jobs that they need both. And this structure does not take into account any of that. And I do think that should be considered. Thank you.
I can introduce you to someone who feels very strongly that way as well. So we can continue this conversation later.
Thank you, Ms. Buff.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Fleming.
I actually have one more question for him.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Orange-Jones.
I appreciate your analysis, and I just want to get your perspective on how you might make sense then of some of the really extraordinary gains we've seen in cities like New Orleans at open enrollment schools that have high percentages of students with special education. Just recently, I think Mr. Romer and Mr. White have shared the State of the Union in terms of the latest results across the state, and in particular the New Orleans cohort of students that have grown at substantial rates across many different types of schools. Certainly there are schools like Ben Franklin on that list, but there are many schools like the First Line schools and others that actually have high populations of students with special needs that have demonstrated tremendous effort, obviously because of the dedication of the educators and the parents and the students who are working very diligently to accomplish such a significant feat. And I think that cohort, as a cohort, sort of one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing cohorts across the state. Curious how you might assess that in light of this analysis.
I don't have access to all that data. I would be very interested in looking at it to completely, but what you're bringing up speaks to the point of y'all want to share, and we all want to share good practices across the state. And when what we're doing is sharing with the public one number, and you made a 183 or a 175 for your school, it really diminishes, in my opinion, a school that you just referred to that may have a high concentration of students with disabilities across all classifications, et cetera, done great. Where do they rank? And the struggles that they have with the capacity of meeting the needs of all those students and still doing well is basically not taken into account here, so that when a school wants to see really good practice, and that's what my council wants, is for schools to say, let me go see where it's done in an inclusive environment so we don't have to segregate kids. I think it would lend itself to that if y'all looked at the school composition of its student population. I think it would actually aid in the ability of transferring good practices across the state.
Thank you. I think the aspect of this policy that really assigns point value to students that have been underperforming is going to be really powerful in terms of seeing how that incentivizes schools to continue to focus on students who are going to need the most support.
Thank you. And we appreciate your comments,
Mr.
Fleming, and it certainly is an issue that we need to pay attention to and consider. So we do appreciate your comments. Ms. Barrios.
Barrios, St. Tammany. I'll make this as quick as possible. I won't give you the whole piece because I emailed you a piece that I'm going to refer to. Real quickly, I would also like to respond to Ms. Boffey's question about, as I understood her question, how can we maintain quality and have a good measurement? But the measurement piece is totally different from quality, and I really haven't heard BESE talk about quality, how to improve the quality of education for many, many, many months. We've talked about how to measure it, not real learning, but how to measure a test. But and I would like to see us get back to talking about why do we get the results that you think the tests are producing for you. But I've emailed everybody this analysis. I'm not a mathematician. I'm an English teacher, and I admit statistics, math go over my head. As an English teacher, my correlation to all this math is that it's figurative language. Okay, specifically a metaphor. Metaphor is when you make a comparison. You create a comparison between two unlike things. And to me, that's what you're doing in a lot of these measurements and these formulas. But I'm just going to read a little bit of this that Mr. Bassett, who is a mathematician and educator in Southwest Louisiana, sent with specific reference to Bulletin 111. He said, I've reviewed a proposed revision of Bulletin 111, which primarily concerns the issuance of 2 performance scores for schools this year. One calculated by the new rules, one calculated by the old rules. I support the idea in principle. It's important that the details be handled properly. And just 2 of the details he talks about, he says BESE needs to set the graduation rate target in the cohort graduation rate adjustment factor to 65%, which I think is what Ms. Beebe was speaking of. The previous rules were year-specific and did not specify a target for 2013, which is what we're talking about now. He says that target, as originally set in 2010, was set at 65% for 2011 and was to increase by 5% per year until 2014, when an 80% target would be reached. However, for the 2011 scores, when the CGRAF was first used, the target was set for 80%. Boom, 80%. To keep the scores lower at the introduction of letter grades. Then, on January 18, 2012, BESE passed a revision of both the formula and the graduation rate target, setting the target at 65% for both 2011 and 2012. Without specifying the 65% target, LDOE might revert to the graduation rate target of 75% for 13, that was established in 10. This would result in high school SPS as being 4.5 points lower simply due to the difference in formulas. And he goes on with some other suggestions. He also says this compares the letter grades under the new and the old systems. The K-8 schools should tend to go up in scores, letter grades, but high school and combination schools will tend to go down.
Ms. Barrios, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up if you can.
Okay, I've emailed this to you, and I would suggest that you really consider this. Hopefully you have a little more math prowess than I do so that you can understand it and understand a little better than MFP. But it's very important that these details be correct, and that when we present to the public this information and say this is the be-all and end-all of whether or not this child in this school is a failure or a success, that at least measure what it's supposed to measure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Romer, I have a question for Ms. Barrios.
Ms. Orange-Jones, Ms. Barrios, I believe,
I have a question.
A member.
I appreciate you raising the issue of quality. I think that's clearly a key component of how to ensure our children get the kinds of opportunities they deserve. Here's my question for you. For over the past decade, as a state, we have, despite much effort, continued to be in the bottom third on many educational standards relative to other states. Louisiana, so for example, I think about Massachusetts, other states that have historically scored in the top third. What do you think what do you think are some of the substantial differences or tenets that have led to states that have actually continued to advance educationally as states? What do you think those variables have been?
Well, there are so many factors involved in a school, in a district, in a state. The population itself, the demographics of it, the poverty, all those things that, of course, some you consider in the BAM. But my whole perspective and problem with all of this measurement is the standardization of our children. You just can't make that comparison. You can't standardize according to a curriculum, a set of Common Core standards, or one test. You cannot expect all kids to attain. It's statistically impossible for everybody to be average or above. It won't happen. So that's my problem with the whole thing. I'm more focused as a teacher on improving the quality of classroom instruction, which I don't think the Department of Ed has focused on. And the fewer educators you have working for the Department of Ed, the less we're going to see that. Measuring it is one thing. Let's measure it properly. I don't believe this is a proper way to measure it, but let's get in there and let's improve the quality of the instruction in our schools.
Do you think measurement is one thing, but aside from measurement, just looking at actually what the standard is, what the actual set of expectations are for any set of children across a given area, do you believe that's actually one variable that is critical for ensuring we're able to know how far children can reach?
No, I don't. I believe that every child is individual, and they're critical, developing their critical thinking skills. It's what's important, and their potential. Even in teaching gifted students, each child had a different potentiality. They weren't all just, boom, supposed to be A students or score, and they didn't score at the highest part of the LEAP test. However, on the ACTs, they would get Duke University scholarships in 7th grade.
Thank you. I have one more question. Do you think if there were some way to assess critical thinking skills, right? If there was some way to assess comprehensively, not narrowly, but comprehensively, critical thinking skills, do you think that would be beneficial to being able to move children forward?
Absolutely, and I did it every day that I taught. I taught gifted kids. My focus was on critical. It should be on all children, whether they're gifted or not. Teachers have that ability. They're not being given that opportunity. That conversation is not being had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrios. Any further questions or comments? I believe we have a motion and a second on this. We don't have a motion. We need a motion to approve as notice of intent. I need a motion to approve.
I make that motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any objection?
I object.
Just roll call real quick.
Roll call.
Ms. Beebe?
No.
Ms. Beebe votes no. Ms. Bofi? Yes. Ms. Bofi votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio?
Yes.
Mr. Gio votes yes. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Dr. Moranti? Yes. Dr. Moranti votes yes. Ms. Orange-Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange-Jones votes yes. Mr. Wagasback?
Yes.
Mr. Wagasback votes yes. Mr. Romer, do you choose to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Ms. Bradford is absent. Motion passes.
Next item.
Next item is item 6.1, page 160. Consideration of recognizing Mr. Alex Nakan for his service as the 2012-2013 student representative on the BESE Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee and introducing Mr. Peyton Chason, who will serve as 2013-2014 student representative.
I do want to apologize quickly for in this item, although we're recognizing Mr. Nakan for his services, we inadvertently listed Mr. Chason as Miss, and obviously we missed the mark on that, so we apologize. But I believe Mr. Chason wants to recognize Mr. Nakan. Before you do that, I want to say that I know other members would probably like to comment. We really do appreciate your service. We've had many fine members, student members of BESE, and I would not hesitate to say that you are one of the most eloquent and most outspoken, which we certainly appreciate. And you always made very, very good input and gave us food for thought. So we appreciate your service very much and wish you luck in the future. Is Mr. Chason going to present this to them, or shall I?
That's for Mr.
And if you will meet me down forward, I'll go right here. This is a little token of our appreciation. This is 2012-2013 BESE Student Representative Alex Nakan. Thank you very much.
And if I have a privilege, I'd just like to kind of give like a little farewell speech, I guess you would say.
Absolutely.
I'll keep it short, though. I strongly believe that God opens doors that you sometimes don't know about. And this honor has been one of those. I began by not knowing the only difference, or only thing I knew about BESE in previous years was I knew all the members listed on all the standardized tests that we took. And that was, and when we would ask, they were like, well, these are the ones that gave you these tests. And so as younger students, it was kind of a negative connotation. But I'm so honored that I was able to be a part of this board and this committee to see that it isn't negative. Sometimes it saddened me in some points and disturbed me. But most of all, and almost all other occasions, it has been very proud and honorable to know that I'm receiving an education in Louisiana, one that no other person or no other state can compare. To know that when I graduate from South Lafourche High School, and not just because my principal and my student council advisors here, but one of the best schools in the South, I have to say, the best in Louisiana. And I really have many things that can quantify that. But I would just like to say that when I graduate and grab my diploma on stage, I know that I can go anywhere in the state, in the world, in the country, and know that my state, my Louisiana state education can carry me throughout. It's been an honor to serve with you, each and every one of you, and all the ones that are seated here today, and to know that I've been able to have at least a small portion in the state education. And so, without further ado, it has been an honor, and it's bittersweet to know that I'll be leaving, but I'll just be down the road. I'm going to LSU. I'll be majoring in chemical engineering, and one day, if classes allot me, I'll be here speaking on behalf of the students, supporting Mr. Chason. And Mr. Chason, knowing him very personally in the last few months, and he's actually also from Lafourche Parish, which is one of the first times it's happened, and I don't know, I believe in BESE history to know from the same parish. Just up the by, we won't hold that against him. But he has a long list of accomplishments. Last year he served as student council for Thibodeau High School's historian in 11th grade. He's been Our Lady of Prompt Succor representative for the past 3 years. He's been a National Honor Society representative for several years and Beta Club representative. And actually, last night he was just elected Thibodeau High School Student Council Secretary. And so, without further ado, it is an honor to know that Mr. Peyton Chason, Mr., not Mrs., Mr. Chason will do an honorable and amazing job fulfilling my position. And I wish you the best of luck, Peyton. Congratulations, man.
Sure. Mr. Lee.
The best compliment that Alex could be paid is he picked his own successor. And, you know, a state full of high school students, and he was able to do that. Because I know Lafourche is a good school system, but they're not that good.
Just to make a note too, there was only 2 students, unfortunately, that had applied for the position, and so out of the 2, Peyton was able to come out on top on the committee. And as I give my report to the student council, LASC, for this past year, I have several suggestions, and also with the committee, to have other students become involved and more educated about it, so that way we do not have the negative connotation of just on testing. So, but yes, I'm very proud, though, they end up working out from Lafourche too. We do have one of the best in the state.
Very good.
Ms. Bophy.
I want to thank you for being here and providing that student voice. And I know that the meetings can get kind of long sometimes, and the material's not always relevant to what you're doing at high school at the moment. But being here and being willing to provide your student voice is really important. And at my time as a student council advisor makes me especially proud to see both of you representing the student voice for our state. So thank you very much for your service, and I look forward to working with Mr. Chasson.
Thank you. And just a final note, I just want to, besides just thanking all of you with all my excitement, I forgot to mention several very important people. As I mentioned, my principal, Ms. Sheremy, is here. My student council advisor, Ms. Groh. Also, my parents.
Maybe if I can interrupt, if everybody would just come down, and we'd like to recognize, we know y'all all played a part in this, so maybe if you call your name out, if you're willing to come forward, that'd be great. You don't have to, but.
We'll start with my principal, Ms. Sheremy. May you come down. Next, Ms. Dana Groh, my student council advisor. She's put up with me for a long time. Also, my parents, Jeannie, and my dad, Patrick. They have been with me for a lot longer than Ms. Groh has, unfortunately, 18 years. And also, my grandparents, Mr. Gary and Miss Mercedes, have been with me throughout the entire process. And there's a few other people also. Mr. Frank Pasqua, he's been my mentor since day one on this board. Mr. Frank is seated over here. Also, Ms. Beth David has been helpful, and Mr. Guy Harvey have always been there for me and supportive along the way. So thank you guys, and thank you to all the people at school and in the state and all these members.
We've got a camera.
If anybody has anything, thank you for all of you.
One last comment. I want to thank Mr. Noncan. You really, I know I said it previously, but you served very well, and your input was always appreciated. We're going to miss you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We need a motion to receive the item.
I make that motion.
Motion and a unanimous second. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Thank you once again. Members, the superintendent did step out, but should be back any moment. We have a number of public comments related to the next agenda item. We do have the ability to recess momentarily. I would recommend that we hear the item, get the brief presentation from the department. We receive public comment. We've obviously all received a good amount of public comment, and during that discussion I would anticipate the superintendent would be back in here to answer any specific questions that anyone might have. We do again have the option to recess and convene the next committee, but I recommend we start with the presentation and the public comment, and if for some reason we need to recess during the course of that, we can. Does anybody object to that course of action?
Not at all. It looks like Ms. Devlin's ready to go.
Okay, so let's move to the next agenda item.
Bridget
Next item
Devlin.
is on-
Oh,
Did you want me to read
I
it?
really am ready to go.
161 is where it begins. 7.1, consideration of public comments received regarding Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, Section 1125, Comprehensive Counseling, and 1705, School Libraries and Media Centers.
Ms. Devlin.
Bridget Devlin with the department. I'm going to be very brief and very procedural just so that you kind of understand why this item is coming to you and what is being passed out to you right now. As I'm sure you're all very aware, you approved revisions back in January to 151 sections of Bulletin 741. We ran that as a notice of intent. It ran in the March issue of the Louisiana Register. We received significant public comment on 2 of the sections, the section on librarians and libraries and the section on counseling services. If we receive 1 public comment, we have to bring it back to the board, so we are bringing it back to you at this time. You are receiving 3 different pieces of paper in front of you right now, so I'm going to walk through each of them. One is the summary of public comment and agency response that is required for the Department of Education to develop in response to any public comment. It is a summary of the public comment and then, as it says in the title, our response to that comment. Our response to that comment is to recommend revisions to both the librarian and the counselor section. You are receiving revisions to section 1125, which is the counseling section. Those revisions are identical to what is in your packet and what was on board docs. They may look slightly different because we put them on top of the January revisions. And so it is a full, it basically includes January and what we're recommending on top of that. So it looks a little different from what is in your packet, but when the strike-throughs are removed and the underline is added, it will be exactly what is in the back of your packet. It is 1 sentence that came out of a conversation that we had with the Counseling Association and then also concerns in the public comments. The third piece of paper you're receiving right now are revisions to the librarian section. There were revisions in the back of your packet to that section. Over the last 24 hours, 36 hours now, we, myself and the superintendent, worked with the Louisiana Association of School Libraries on some language that they recommended. The majority of the language in front of you right now is language that they recommended. The subsection at the bottom where it talks about the alternate structure are things that the department is recommending retain from the previous policy in January, because we really do feel strongly about allowing that flexibility that will give districts the ability to evolve as technology expands as well. So those are the 3 documents you have in front of you. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. I know we'll probably have a lengthy discussion on it after the public comments, so, but I can answer procedural questions at this time, and we can talk about philosophy of the policy after.
If I may, for clarity for the board members.
Sure.
In the handouts that you gave us today, that I don't know that the audience has a copy, I certainly would think if we don't have those, if we could have copies made, is it possible to have copies made?
I have passed out the librarian to all of the librarians that I could find in that back corner.
Okay.
We can get more copies made. I will point out the counselor that was just passed out and the summary of public comment and agency response that was just passed out is on board docs.
Okay.
And has been.
That's great. And I will say this, I'm going to walk through each real quickly to make sure we understand what we're seeing, and I think the audience will benefit from hearing that explanation, and then we'll go to public comment, and then I'll come back to board members for additional comment or questions in that order, if that suffices. As I read 1125, comprehensive counseling, the change that we're considering today is what is highlighted on your handout.
Yes, thank you for
and that
pointing
reads, that reads as, I'm going to read it now just for the sake of everyone. It says LEAs providing counseling services through alternate means shall evaluate providers using a performance-based system based on measurable outcomes. Is that correct in my saying that that is what you're asking us to consider as a change today?
That is our amendment.
On item 1705, obviously the title has been adjusted to now read School Library, Media Programs, and Student Resources. Down under A, It says BESE recognizes the importance of providing all students access to high-quality literature and information resources in a variety of formats in order to support and complement reading and learning. B, every school shall provide its students with access to reputable and relevant digital and or print literary and information resources that relate directly to school curriculum and with opportunities to explore information and ideas beyond the sphere of the regular instructional program. Schools shall ensure students are provided instruction in the selection and use of resources. Item C, secondary, is now struck out. And that sentence now reads, each school shall have a library and shall have a certified librarian. School library shall be staffed with librarian as follows. And then item 2 under C now reads, principal shall have the authority to determine how resources and assistance are provided. Are those the items that I read? Is that what is being presented to us today as a modification?
Yes, however, I just noticed there's a typo in A. It should say reading and writing and not reading and learning, and I apologize for that.
And on item A...
Learning, never mind. It is correct.
Okay.
Learning.
Reading and learning. Okay. So those board members, I think you follow me in that explanation of what we're considering today. We've also made a response to the public comment. I am going to move now to public comment in face of, now I think the audience has heard what we're looking at today. And so I will go through public comment. I will say this, we have a large number of comments. I'm going to allow every speaker to speak. However, I would ask if you could keep your comments succinct and you really find that you just want to echo what the previous speaker said, we would appreciate that. Now, I am going to limit everyone to 1 minute, just given the volume. But I will do my best to give leeway and be fair to every speaker. So I will start calling them, and we will listen to them. Mr. Lee, did you have a question?
Before you take the public comments, I do have a question or concern or an objection.
Okay.
To one of these proposals on the school librarians down under item 2 at the bottom.
Yes.
Where it says principals shall have the authority to determine how resources and assistance are provided. Principals do not report to this board. They're not employed by this board. They have their own accountability system, and I don't see how this board can take action to direct that principals can make this kind of decision.
Why don't we take that under advisement? We will follow back when the superintendent returns for his comment, but duly noted, and we will come back to that before taking action on this item, if that's okay, Mr. Lee. Staff is asked to read. Do you need to get it in the record? We're going to read the entire item quickly just so that it is in the record, and then I will move to public comment.
I just want to get this, what the department recommendation is in the record, and then it can be revised by board members as you see fit. The department recommendation is to receive the summary of public comments and agency response regarding Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, Section 1125, Comprehensive Counseling, and 1705, School Libraries and Media Centers. Direct BESE staff to not proceed with the final adoption of the March 20, 2013 Notice of Intent regarding revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators. Approve additional revisions to 1125 Comprehensive Counseling and 1705 School Libraries and Media Centers as presented and recommended by the LDE, and direct the LDE to incorporate these revisions into the Bulletin 741 revisions approved by the board in January 2013, and direct BESE staff to submit for publication in the Louisiana Register as a new Notice of Intent the amended document in its entirety.
Except that I think we need to change the title of 1705 to what the department is now recommending, which would be School Libraries, Media Programs, and Student Resources.
Very well. And I'm going to proceed to public comment, and I will start at the top. Terrell Washington. And if you could please state your name, and if you represent a group, please state that. And again, I'd ask each of you to consider the large number of speakers that we do have today. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tara Washington, and I'm representing Louisiana School Counseling Association. And one of the things that I wanted to do was give a definition of school counselors, because I think it's a misconception of what we do in the schools. I've often heard that we were classified as paper pushers, and we're not. So I wanted to give a definition from the Education Trust. And the definition of school counselors is a profession that focuses on the relationship and interactions between students in their school environment to reduce the effects of environmental and institutional barriers that impede students' academic success. School counselors foster educational equality, assess, and academic success in a rigorous curriculum to ensure that all students graduate from high school ready to succeed in college and careers. The trained school counselor is an assertive advocate, creating opportunities for all students to pursue dreams of high aspirations. The school counselor assists students in their academic, career, social, and personal development and helps them follow the path to success. The school counselor serves as a leader as well as an effective team member, working with teachers, administrators, and other school personnel to help each student succeed. The school counselor is a consultant, empowers families to act on behalf of their children by helping parents and guardians identify student needs and interests and assess available resources. The school counselor focuses attention on students from whom schools have been the least successful, low-income students and students of color. Counselors concentrate on issues, strategies, and interventions that will help close the achievement gap between these students and their more advantaged peers. School counselors are accountable and measure success for demonstrating their activities, contribute to increasing the number of all students completing academically, prepared to choose from a wide range of substantial post-secondary options, including college. So I just really wanted you guys to understand what we do as school counselors. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany Baker. Then we'll have Tanya Dupuy. Tanya Dupuy? No, okay. Dr. Jennifer Curry? And then Chi Franklin? Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please
I'm
state your
Jennifer
name.
Curry.
Oh, thank you.
And I am an assistant professor at Louisiana State University, but I am not representing LSU today. I am representing Louisiana School Counselor Association as president-elect. I thank Ms. Washington for her definition there of school counseling. I just want to focus more on student services. It was my understanding that student services would not be cut by these changes. So I think we need to be clear about what students have been receiving from school counselors. Now, since you don't have all day to listen to me, and I know that as professors can get a little long-winded, I'm going to share with you just what we do only in the areas of career and academics for students. And this is a succinct version of it. It's truncated. So in regards to K-12 career and college readiness, just to give you my background, I'm a national expert on this. I have a textbook under press right now with Springer, and that textbook is on K-12 career and college readiness. What do school counselors do? We provide a comprehensive curriculum in the classrooms, beginning in kindergarten through 12th grade, on career education and development. We do career and academic assessments consistently throughout school years, including the 8th grade Explore and the 10th grade Plan. Our services in that area include test administration, coordinating of testing services, interpretation of results, and post-test advisement related to results in academic planning. We do parent workshops on FAFSA, TOPS, high school course offerings, and diploma types. We do student and parent academic advisement aligned with academic achievement, aptitude, and career interests, which school counselors are qualified to do. They have the certification to do that. We do individual graduation plans with every kid. And those individual graduation plans help inform kids' post-secondary choices and their high school course selection. Coordinate statewide testing, EOC. We coordinate testing services with the military. We assist students with college applications, scholarship, and TOPS, report card conferencing. And we get students to register for AP courses, along with helping students with test anxiety, homework skills, study skills, and other success strategies. That's just one area. That's just career and college readiness. That's not all personal, social, and all academic services we offer. You cannot piecemeal that together by bringing in alternative people who are not certified or qualified to do those things. This is a 48-hour master's that school counselors are credentialed in, and many programs, including my own at LSU, are moving to 60. These programs have to be cohesive. You have one person come in one day a week and do career, one person come in a day and do personal, social. They don't know the kids, they don't know the school. It's hard to make those programs cohesive.
Ms. Curry, if I could ask you to wrap it up, that'd be
Yes,
great.
sir, you can.
Thank you.
If you have people in your school doing alternative means, I think they should be held to give these same services to students. And if I were a parent right now, the answer I would want from you is, are my student services getting cut? And if they're not, then when you get an alternative means person in my school, what's my protocol to come back to this board and get answers for why my kid isn't getting these services? Thank you.
May I ask you a question while you're
Yes.
sitting there?
Yes.
I appreciate your comments. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you being here today. The language before us says that LEA shall provide and not be limited to a list of services.
Yes.
Many of which you just identified. Is that list of services, in your opinion, not the right list? Is that what is?
I'm going to tell you where I got this list. Okay. In 2010, the Louisiana Department of Education had the Blue Ribbon Commission on Educational Excellence convene to write the Louisiana School Counseling Model. These are the services students are to be given, and that was to help with graduation rates.
I understand that. I'm saying, but the policy that's in front of us actually states that each LEA shall provide these services, and it lists them. Now, it does not say that? Am I reading
Did it not?
wrong?
Did it list every service that I just listed? Because that's what school counselors
It says,
are
but not
providing.
limited to. LEA shall ensure these services, but not limited to. And then it lists a number of services.
Right. But these
Is there
services.
a specific service that's not listed that you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just gave you a very specific list, and that's just career and college readiness. But
Well,
I
this
mean, I
has
could.
career. This has career and occupational information. It has.
But that's not saying a curriculum, a K-12 curriculum. Do you remember last time I was here and I testified about when kids start making career choices? They start making them at 5. By middle school, they've decided if they're college material or not. That curriculum matters. So that's not the language that I see. When
Okay,
look
I
at that.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a
Chair.
good day. Thanks.
Yes.
I need to get a bit of clarification. Help me understand what we're being asked to approve today in relation to what existed before we got these recommendations.
Sure.
What's the difference? What
Sure,
are we
there's-
being asked to do?
And Bridget, Ms. Devlin will help me if I'm incorrect, but we had made changes to the bulletin in a previous meeting. Under statute, if it goes out for public comment. If we receive public comment, we are obligated to respond to that public comment, which is one of the things that we're looking at today, the response to the public comment. In addition to that response, the department has recommended modifications to what we approved previously, and those modifications to what we approved last time are in yellow. And those are in response, those recommended changes are in response to the public comment and the feedback that we have gotten since that last meeting.
Okay, but I guess what I'm really asking is, what did we approve last time? What were the changes?
Everything, and again, Ms. Devlin, let's just test me on this to see. I could very well, you correct me if I get it incorrect. What's underlined in the handouts that you have, whatever is struck out or underlined was changed at the previous meeting. What is in yellow is an additional change now being presented to us due to public comment and feedback that we've received. Am I correct, Ms. Devlin?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Does that make sense, Mr. Lee? So in the handouts, you have two handouts here. We actually have three, but the two that are, let's just be clear, the two that we're specifically considering deal with item 1125, comprehensive counseling, and item 1705. What you see there, if it's underlined or struck out, that was what we did in the previous meeting. If it is highlighted in yellow, those are now additional changes we're being considered due to the public comment and feedback that we've received.
Okay, if we look at the 1125, the counseling.
Yes, sir.
As I see it, the action we took out the statement referred to the Louisiana
Correct.
State Comprehensive Guidelines and Counseling.
Correct.
It added this provision shall not apply to schools capable of providing academic guidance, post-secondary counseling, and personnel development support through alternative means.
That's correct.
And
now what's in yellow, let me just follow that up. What's in yellow directly behind that is an additional change that is being brought to us today in response to public comment.
I guess what I'm trying to get a little better handle on is what happens if we just go back to where we were? Now, obviously, the action we previously have taken has really concerned counselors and librarians and school systems.
May I make a comment?
Yes, well, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to interrupt you. I will comment, but if you...
I'm just trying to get an understanding of what we've done or what we're proposing to do, and why it is not acceptable to the people in the field.
Certainly.
And evidently, it's because they feel that we are decreasing the services or permitting the opportunity to not provide counseling and librarian services as we have in the past.
Certainly.
Is that generally correct?
But here's, and the superintendent's here, and we're in public comment now, but let me give you...
Is that generally correct?
Let me, rather than saying yes or no, let me just give you a response to your comment.
Okay.
We have the prerogative to not approve this. Okay, we could not approve the change in language, and it would go back to the previous language. Okay, that is a choice that we could make today. We did have a great deal of public comment in regard to the changes we made. In response to that comment, we've now been presented with new language that we think clarifies and make the policy better based on some of the comments we received. I also would say this, and I think this is a healthy discussion. Part of our issue that we had in the posting of the bulletin last time and what we passed certainly came with some misunderstanding, perhaps also could have been worded slightly with more clarity as we've been presented today. So what you're seeing today is in fact in response to the reaction that we were getting, which in some cases was accurate and in some cases was a fear, but nonetheless legitimate, that we had to address. Now, the overall idea of streamlining Bulletin 741 is embedded within this particular issue itself, which embedded within this issue is what should the state mandate in terms of educating its kids versus what responsibility should we allow LEAs to make the decisions on. And in this particular instance, we are affirming that the counseling services need to be provided. The language in front of you says that, as a matter of fact. We are stating that it could be provided in an alternative means in some instances, but that if it is provided in an alternative mean, it must meet a measurable outcome. And in terms of libraries, what we're saying is the old Bulletin 741 was somewhat dated given the changes that we've had in technology and given the different methods that people have to deliver these services. However, we don't want our attempt to streamline Bulletin 741 and our attempt to give districts more decision-making authority at the local district to be confused with the idea that we don't believe libraries are critical and the services that librarians provide are critical. So the language, in my opinion, the language in front of you today clarifies that to a great deal, which the old language that we approved previously where there was, for instance, I'll give a very specific example. Item C on 1705. It was somewhat silly that it said each secondary school shall have a library. We scratched the word secondary and we say now each school shall have a library, because we got a great deal of public comment back from elementary schools and elementary school librarians who said, rightly so, this seems to treat us differently and we don't like that. And I think that was a legitimate complaint, and this language now addresses that. When we say each school, not each secondary school, we now say each school must have a library, and we articulate that. Now, so there's some fundamental questions here. Is this the right language for these particular items? And in light of the idea that we're trying to be less prescriptive, and this is my thought on it. We're trying to be less prescriptive to districts on exactly how they design their delivery of a quality education. Less prescriptive, because they know their area better, they know their students better, they know their resources better than do we. That we're trying to get Bulletin 741 in a format that does two things. Outlines what are best practices and best outcomes and what is important, but does give districts some flexibility on how they deliver that method. Now, the question that you must ask yourself, in my opinion, Mr. Lee, is does this language do that? Now, I don't know if the superintendent, we have a number of public comments we can continue to go through, and I'm certain the superintendent will have comment at the end, but he may want to comment now.
I want to react to what I think I just heard you say. The purpose of us getting into this to start with was to allow more flexibility at the local level. That's what I said. I just heard you say.
And it also reflects a change in technology and other things that make some of the old language no longer relevant. So I want to be fair and give a full description. It's particularly when you talk about libraries, that the old language seemed a bit confining in how library services could be provided given new technology that's available. If that's a fair characterization.
I guess what's concerning me, we were not hearing complaints or concerns, I wasn't, with what we had before we got into making changes. So now though, we're hearing lots of concern. I'm not hearing people in the field say, we like the changes you're making. I'm not hearing that from.
May I disagree with that?
I'm not hearing that from librarians. I'm not hearing it from counselors. I'm not hearing it from principals. I'm not hearing it from superintendents. I'm not hearing it from anybody that they appreciate or want the changes we're making. So if we're making these changes for their sake, I'm ready to say, let's don't make the changes and let's all go on with life as it was.
Let me make one comment, and I'm going to let the superintendent respond because he's asked to respond, but let me say this. There's nothing that we've done here that makes a district change what they're doing. Okay, so if they're happy with what they're doing and they believe the services they're providing are the best services and they like the outcomes that they're getting in their district, there is nothing that we do today that changes or mandates that they change that.
I understand it does not require them to change it, but it clearly is going to lend itself to the new bulletins that they would be following.
Members, I apologize for not being here at the outset of this. We had an issue in the legislature that needed to be addressed, so I had to go deal with that. But let me just tell you, if I can, what I believe to be the story of this. Maybe this can help reconcile where Mr. Lee's comments are coming from. We started this process a year ago at the superintendent's urgings, not at the counselor's urgings, not at the librarian's urgings, not the teacher's urgings, at the superintendent's urgings, to review Bulletin 741 on two grounds. One, that it was antiquated. Two, that it was boxing them in. This was stated over and over again at the Superintendent's Advisory Council. The Bulletin 741 is about 200 pages, maybe about half a page of which is about counselors and librarians. So you, 4 months ago, changed about 150 to 100 policies to allow greater discretion on the part of those who run school systems, mainly superintendents and their teams, as well as principals. 2 of those changes have come up time and again with respect to the counselors and librarians, because the feeling among those members of our workforce is that there should not be as much ability to exercise discretion. There's a good model, and we should stick with the model. So let's talk about the process of those changes. In January, you heard in December, this came in front of you. It was requested that because of the overwhelming nature of Bulletin 741 changes, literally more than 100 policies, that it be deferred. It was deferred until January. I believe it was the January meeting. It might have been the February meeting. At the January meeting, the policy was changed to reinstate a staffing ratio. It said, rather than saying there'll be flexibility, it would say, no, there will be a staffing ratio. If you have a plan to get you out of the staffing ratio, you may do that, but the department is going to look at it. That was your compromise. There was still concern on the part of the librarians and the counselors. So over the last 2 to 3 months, we have worked with the librarians and the counselors, and we have made changes. The counselors, while I recognize them, they're here today, and Kathy and Wendy and Frank and all of the association, who I have a deep, deep amount of respect for. Their belief in what they do is very genuine. They have asked for what any solution that's an alternative to a full-time counselor to be evaluated as a counselor is. We made that change in the bulletin. Is it everything that they have asked us to do? No. But in policy, when you're asking for change, it is a compromise. It is not everything, but it is a compromise. With respect to the librarians, they said the problem we have with this policy is it's not clear. You still have the existence of a rule that requires libraries only in secondary schools and not for the 66% of our kids who are in primary and middle schools. Well, we changed that. And you know who wrote the language? The Librarians Association wrote this language. Are we at 100% agreement with the librarians? No. Are we at 100% with the agreement with the counselors? No. But are we having a friendly dialogue to reach a compromise that ensures that we preserve the integrity of the counselor model, the integrity of the librarian model, while still allowing for some creative actors to do things a little bit differently? Yes. Are there more safeguards because of their urgings? Yes. Have we worked hour after hour on compromise? Yes. And so, board members, I'm urging you to see that reflected today. I'm urging you to vote to support this new language which reflects a compromise, and to extend an invitation to my colleagues, unhappy as they may be that 100% of the request was not granted, but knowing that we've worked to the vast majority of those policy changes, to now work with us to implement this policy in a way that's successful for children. And that's my ask of you today, board members.
I want to react to that.
Yes, and then I want to go through the public comment in light of that, and I'll come back to the board again. But Mr. Lee.
I certainly agree, Superintendent White, that superintendents did want changes to 741. It was cumbersome. It needed change, and a lot of the changes have been made, over 100 policies. But I did not hear a single superintendent say, I want it changed for counselors and I want it changed for librarians. Those are the two policies. Those are the two that I've not heard any request for change, but yet now we're hearing all the concern with the change we're making. And I guess my question would be, if nobody has asked for change for counselors and librarians, why are we upsetting everybody over it?
Mr. Lee, respectfully, I disagree with your characterization because I was in those conversations.
Well, and so was I, Superintendent White.
Well, at the Superintendent's Advisory Council.
Right.
We raised issues of staffing ratios. And I don't want to make this more of an argument than it needs to be, because I actually...
And I don't either.
Yeah, and I feel like we are... look, I mean, and I've said this to Kathy, and I've said this to Wendy and Frank. There is one simple issue on which we disagree. And that simple issue is, should you have only a one way to deliver a service, or should you allow some possible room for exception? And actually, we discussed the staffing ratios with the superintendents. And Mr. Lee, I can agree with you that it's not like everybody stood up and said, oh, thank God, finally the staffing ratios are changing, but we had general assent on that question. And we have tried to demonstrate significant deference to the professionals in the field who are clearly very capable at doing their work. And I think we've gotten it to a point where principals can exercise discretion, but only if they prove that it is truly a plan that meets a standard of accountability. And we have modified the library rule to correct a problem that went on for decades, which is that it excluded elementary and middle schools from having to provide library services. I think those are all positive changes. And I think that there are a lot of things on which this board has had to be a forerunner of change, rather than having to have it articulated by those whom it most directly impacts.
And I appreciate all of the time and effort, and it has been a lot of time and effort that you've given to this. And I appreciate your willingness to make adjustments that you feel like would be more acceptable. I guess it just seems to me it would have been 100% more acceptable, easier, if we had left everything for counselors and librarians as it was and said to superintendents of the school systems, if you need exceptions, if you need changes, you can apply. Looks like that would have sure made it more acceptable.
You want to put that in the form of motion?
I was going to go to public comments. If I may, I've got a number of people who did not want to speak, and I'm going to call their name out. And Claudia Milton wanted to oppose, but no comment. Jill Lockhart wanted to oppose, but no comment. The following person actually wants to speak, Wendy Rock. And I will remind everybody to try your best to. I've given everyone so far. I've not limited anybody so far to 1 minute. So if you'll just do your best to be brief.
I'll talk fast.
Thank you.
My name's Wendy Rock, and I'm a high school counselor, and I would really like to thank the superintendent and Mr. Romer for keeping an open mind and being willing to compromise and listening to school counselors on this issue. It's my hope that we can continue our dialogue and our collaboration. And just as you all have come to recognize the knowledge, skills, and leadership that school counselors contribute to education, hopefully all principals will one day recognize the contributions that we make to student achievement. It's clear the Department of Education is not trying to eliminate school counselors and sees value in what school counselors do. It's also clear they recognize the importance of trusting our educational leaders and letting them make decisions about the students in the schools they lead. I agree wholeheartedly that principals need flexibility and the ability to be creative in meeting the needs of students. I also believe school counselors bring a different perspective and have knowledge, skills, and training that are essential for partnering with this principal to collaborate on school-wide policies that will help every student reach their potential. While I don't believe you're trying to eliminate school counselors, I do believe there's a lack of understanding on the importance of students having access to a comprehensive developmental school counseling program. School counseling's been around for over 100 years, and it has evolved from a position to a service, and y'all mentioned that a lot earlier, to a program. School counseling is an integral component of a school's academic mission. Comprehensive school counseling programs ensure equitable access to a rigorous education for all students. It's delivered to students systematically and is based on data. In other words, it adapts to the needs of the school and the students that school serves. Additionally, it identifies the knowledge and skills that all students will acquire as a result of the program. These knowledge and skills, known as standards, are the school counselor's common core. The Louisiana Department of Education recently held such a strong belief in the value of a comprehensive school counseling program that it invested time and allocated resources toward the creation of the Louisiana school counseling model. Our standards, or common core, are found on pages 54 to 57. The current revision to Bulletin 741 is not acceptable because the evaluation instrument suggested is not the COMPAS evaluation. COMPAS would ensure the integrity of the comprehensive school counseling program regardless of who's providing the service. The COMPAS evaluation will ensure that every student has access to a school counseling model that is data-driven, preventive in nature, and comprehensive in scope. Principals should have more flexibility. They should be able to get creative and make decisions that best meet the needs of their students, but where do you draw the line? Will principals be allowed flexibility when staffing algebra, biology, or U.S. history courses, disregarding training or certification? Will there be no limit on the number of students in a classroom? Today, I'm asking that you consider ensuring that Louisiana students have access to a comprehensive and developmental school counseling program. Is there such a sense of urgency on this school counseling issue that we must make the decision now? There are many other changes that are giving principals plenty of flexibility and decision-making ability, 150, I believe. Please consider postponing this one change, giving us time to continue our dialogue and come up with solutions that all parties will agree is what is best for Louisiana students.
Thank you, Wendy. And I want to I'll make a couple comments, and I appreciate you coming to my office some time ago with some of your colleagues and spending time. Your passion for the topic, your knowledge of the topic. I just appreciate you reaching out to me and spending time, so thank you for that. I will make a few comments in regard to some of the reference you made. You know, I do believe that we need to have more flexibility when it comes to teaching history and English and math. I believe that.
I had a feeling you would.
Okay. Now, what do I think the best method is? You know, if you had to come up with a single method, then yeah, I think the best method is 17 kids and a great teacher. That's not always the best. It also doesn't meet the need of every child. If it did, you know, that was what we would do. So I think I agree with your sentiment. I think this policy, and this is my opinion again, I think this policy as written protects the importance of counselors by identifying that importance, but does give, for the first time, some sense of actually consider, are the counseling services you currently providing adequate? I think that's a very legitimate question that I think you would probably agree with me that in some instances it is provided adequately, in some, and others it's not. So the idea of providing more flexibility to a district to look at its own services that it's providing and determine, is there a better method, or do we in fact need to improve the method that we're currently using, I think is a good step. I also don't believe this. I don't believe this is the end of our dialogue nor the end of our discussion on the importance of counselors and how to best deliver these services. I think this is one moment in time with one specific change that I think actually improves the current policy. Now, should we continue to work? Should we look at how different districts provide counseling services? Would we, in fact, find some examples of people that provided it potentially differently and did a better job? Would we find out they don't do a better job? I think that's relevant for us to explore. The idea that just because we used to do it one way is a threat to our students or a threat to our counselors. I regret that that's the message that's been given, because that's not the message we want to give. We believe the counseling services are critical. We do believe, though, that there's more than one method to get it done. Whether a district chooses to do that will be up to that district, though. It won't be up to us. Now, but I appreciate your time and I appreciate your comments.
Can I just comment on one thing you said?
Yes.
This comprehensive model will address figuring out what those needs are for students. That is part of the model. That's part of a comprehensive school counseling program, is identifying what those needs are. And using data, it's data-driven, using data to support that and then to address it.
Is there anything that prohibits a superintendent now from using that document to look at the practices they're using in terms of counseling? Is there anything that we're doing here today that would prohibit them from using that document?
No, you're just allowing them not to use the document.
Okay, thank you.
President Romer. President Romer.
Are they all using it now? Under the current law, are they all using it now? Okay, thank you. Ms. Bofi.
I'm going to have to ask that your comments be succinct, as you have committed me to an activity recognizing Students of the Year in just
Yes.
a little bit while. So
Okay,
do I need to set a timer
I'll quit
for
talking.
you?
I'll quit talking. I'll keep moving. Chris Belser.
Mr. Romer, as he's approaching,
Yes,
I
Ms.
make
Beebe.
a comment? I have to say, in listening to the discussion and going back to what Mr. Superintendent Lee said, this discussion stems from the fact, and if school superintendents or principals are considering eliminating counseling or librarian services, it's due to finances. I mean, we are putting them in that situation. I don't think any superintendent or any principal would want to say no because they value these services. So I think that's what we need to decide as a board. And Mr. Lee, if there's a motion on the floor, I'm going to make a substitute motion that we revert back to the original bulletin language. And let's end this discussion. And I need a second.
I'll second it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chris Belser. Before I begin this, I just want to echo what she just said. It is due to finances, as I stated last time we were here. Last year, I was at a different school, but my counseling position was cut due to financial constraints. The reason I'm here today is to discuss some insight that I have about working with mental health providers other than school counselors at my school. Outside mental health practitioners visit my school often to speak to students with whom their agency is affiliated. One problem with this is that many of these individuals are not licensed or certified as counselors or social workers, meaning they cannot conduct actual counseling, but instead act more as a mentor. The other issue is that these professionals often simply come in, check in with the student, and leave without examining the student's actual academic and behavioral performance at school. My school also contracts with an agency to provide a social worker 3 days a week to see specific students. Since she is employed by the agency, she is considered a third-party provider with regard to Medicaid billing. Some of my students see a mental health professional outside of school, but often need additional support in school. Our social worker, who's great at her job, is unable to see these students because of potential double billing through Medicaid. My point in sharing this information is not to say that this will be the case in every school, but that these situations may become more common if you approve the use of other providers. If you want a reality of what I do, let me share a few highlights from this school year alone. I've worked with 3 students who've lost parents or guardians to medical issues this year. 2 more have had relatives shot or murdered. One of my students struggled after Hurricane Isaac because he and his father had to be rescued from their rooftop while visiting relatives in LaPlace. I've had 3 students who have had a parent arrested for cruelty to juvenile based on reports to DCFS that I and my colleagues have made. I had to assist a young female with telling her mother that she had been raped by her stepbrother. I've had at least 12 students who are imminently suicidal and 1 more who engaged in self-injury at school. Several of my students have been arrested or temporarily hospitalized. This job isn't easy, and it certainly isn't one to be trusted to someone without the proper training or credentials. This year alone, I've conducted over 600 individual counseling sessions by myself with approximately 130 students. When looking at my data recently, I observed that more than 50% of the students I have seen were self-referred, meaning they came to me on their own. Students want quality counseling in schools. Please don't take that away from them or diminish its quality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your comments. Dr. Broussard, And if I may, I'll appreciate the applause. The shorter that it can be, the quicker we'll move on. So, and then Jennifer DeGrease.
My name is Jacqueline Broussard. I've been a counselor for 8.5 years. In 2010, my school counseling program was the first Louisiana school to be recognized by the American School Counselor Association. My principal and I were recognized in Boston at the national conference. I now work at a high school in my hometown, and I've begun the process of developing a model program that I will strive to once again get recognized by ASCA. I will be president of the Louisiana School Counselor Association in 2016, when Louisiana will host the ASCA National Conference. School counselors from across our country will come to learn the current research-based strategies to move our nation's students to greater success. The school counselor has been a familiar position in our state for a very long time. This is the first time in its history that every public school counselor must demonstrate accountability for student success. It's so new, we don't have the results yet. I am currently in the process of compiling data to present to my stakeholders. Accountability forces those who are closest to our children to strive for our children's success. When I was working on my dissertation study in 2009, I found that aspiring first-generation college student received relevant information from their school counselors. What did they do with this information? They scheduled the minimal courses to prepare for college. They didn't prepare for ACT, and they were likely not to apply for scholarships that were available from colleges or organizations. What I learned from this study: school counseling is more than just giving information. It is building a relationship to ensure that students have opportunity and are given the support to achieve success. Accountability, finally, for school counselors, is how we ensure success. I wish there was accountability when I was in school, because I missed out. And also, my children 10 years ago missed out because there was no accountability. I worked with middle school minority students and students in poverty.
Jacqueline, I'm going to...
My results showed significant improvement in math, improvement in study strategies, decreased suspensions, decreased reports of bullying, decreased truancy and behavioral referrals. For the sake of those that come after you, I'm going to ask if you don't mind wrapping it up, that'd be great. I've gone long over the 1 minute that I've identified, and there are others that want to speak, and I'm going to have to be harder and harder the later and later. Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I had 3 minutes.
Thank you. What's that?
Oh, I thought I had 3 minutes.
I've given you 3 minutes. I actually started the meeting saying I'd give 1, so I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay. The school counseling program is designed to be an integral part of the educational process. School counselors have the best training to work with students. Please continue to give our Louisiana students the best person for the job. Please address the barriers that interfere with the job of the certified Louisiana school counselor and cheat our children out of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And audience members, I know everyone's passionate, and I certainly appreciate your time. There are a large number of people that still want to speak, and I'm going to really ask you to try to limit your comments as best you can, because the longer each of you go, the harder it becomes on the next person and for them to make comment. And I want to get to every person and give them an opportunity to make comment. So I would respectfully ask that you please do your best to be brief. I am giving longer than the minute that I outlined at the beginning of the meeting, but I will at some point ask you to wrap it up in your comments if you go longer than that. I appreciate it. Thank you. And please state your name.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer DeGrease. I apologize. I have a head cold, so I'm going to do my best. First of all, I want to let you know that I do not support the recommended changes that y'all have addressed today for the counseling program, because it still sees an alternative means as an appropriate way to provide comprehensive services to our students. I'll tell you why. I'm a professional school counselor at Oak Lawn Junior High School in Houma, Louisiana. I've been doing that for 4 years. I want you to consider this. Picture in your mind your own child or children, your own grandchild or grandchildren. I want you to see them running around, laughing, and enjoying life. Imagine holding their hands and playing a game with them. You would do anything to protect them. You would go to great lengths to provide them with the best education and services that you could find. Now imagine those children going through a tough time, bullying, teasing, trouble at home, maybe a death of a close loved one, or even abuse or neglect. You would be heartbroken, and you would want somebody who already has an established long-term relation with him or her, someone who has been with him and her day in and day out, to be there immediately. You would not want your child to wait for an untrusted or unknown teacher, maybe a feared administrator or outside unknown agency counselor who maybe could only fit in your child or grandchild when his or her schedule opened to work with your child. This is what will happen to our students across this state if flexibility via privatization is an option. I do not need a statistic to know that kids will only open up with someone they trust and feel comfortable with. They cannot concentrate in class if they are dealing with an issue. Why not, in this time of greatest need, make sure that your family gets every opportunity to feel loved, supported, and important? And I'm going to kind of scoot through the rest, but I will let you know that I attended the BESE board meeting in January, and I was shocked by what I heard. I feel that too many people on this board skated around the real issue. Y'all kept saying that we're not asking districts to cut counselors, but we want them to have more flexibility to service kids in the best way that they feel is the best. But the reality is, when the opportunity is presented, it will be taken. In my own district, we have elementary and middle professional school counselors sharing schools because of previous changes in Bulletin 741. One counselor goes to one school every day of the week. That means that those schools are getting one counselor once a week. Is that what you call justice for our kids? Is that what you call the best service for our children? It's not. It's not a rapport. It's not a relationship.
If I may ask you to wrap it up, I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. You can make a final comment.
Oh.
I didn't mean if you stop
Oh,
immediately.
okay.
But I wanted you.
I just, I think that we put forth, I'm so happy that y'all put forth the compass evaluation rubric for counselors, but y'all haven't even given it a chance to see what data it can prove. And I'm asking that y'all take this opportunity to go back and really look at what we do. Some of the counselors in high school can't provide comprehensive services because they're testing or they're doing master schedules. That should be changed over time, and that's what this evaluation rubric is going to do. So let it work its course. Let's see what they have, and you will understand the importance of school counselors. Thank you.
Thank you. Brianna Parfait.
Excuse me?
Oh, I've called the next speaker. Thank you. Yeah, please state your name. That'd be great. Thank you.
Brianna Parfait.
And pull the microphone close. It's not a very loud microphone.
Brianna Parfait.
Yes.
I'm here to ask each of you to please consider allowing each elementary, middle, and high school to have mandatory school counselors. I'm currently a 7th grader at Oak Lawn Junior High in Houma, Louisiana, but I have faced many personal challenges throughout the years. With the help of my school counselor, I've made it through my problems. Every day, kids get bullied, abused, and many have suicidal thoughts. A school counselor may be the only person a kid will trust to tell these problems to. Every day, kids commit suicide over being bullied. Nobody should lose their life over a few words. That's why we have counselors to talk to. I myself have been bullied for 2 years, but thanks to my counselor, she helped me. Our one-on-one talks together have made me realize bullies are nothing to me. But without her, I wouldn't have realized that. Thanks to the bullying committee she put together, I now help prevent other bullying acts. My school counselor isn't just a worker at school, she is my friend. She does a lot of things around the school to help everybody. She makes things that are impossible possible. It would be a shame to lose her. I realize that you are not saying to cut counselors from schools, but if the wording remains as recommended, that is what is going to happen over time as less and less funding is provided to school districts. School counselors are a true blessing. Please consider changing the wording for all school counselors from recommended to mandatory to ensure that every student receives service to help them succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parfait. Kathy Smith, and then Trish Gilbert. Trish Gribble says opposed, but no comment. Ann Perrone says opposed, but no comment. Amanda Allman says opposed, but no comment. Ainsley Pellerin says opposed, but no comment. And I assume you are Miss Kathy Smith.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy Smith, and I'm a school counselor, and I'm also LASCA's president. I want to personally thank Superintendent White for reaching out to us over the last few months. I'm hoping we've earned his respect while working with him. It has been a pleasure, and our organization looks forward to continuing our working relationship. However, with all due respect, LASCA can't support the changes stated in Bulletin 741. I am passionate when it comes to my profession. I strongly feel there is no one that can replace a school counselor. We can work together with outside agencies, but no one is trained to meet the personal, social, academic, career needs of the students. The Louisiana school model is the perfect solution to meeting the needs of all the students in the school. School counselors use the school data, demographics, and they tailor-make a data-driven, comprehensive school program. You want it, I have good news, you want it at no way, just one way, it's going to be different at every school. It will look different because of the demographics and what the school needs. I really don't think it's your intent to get rid of school counselors, but it surely will open the door to do so. And if this does happen, it will be the students of Louisiana that will suffer. So I'm going to appeal to you by reading some of my students' comments that were sent to the BESE board. Philip says, I find that school counselors are a critical part of the school system. Counselors are specifically trained to meet the everyday needs of our lives. To me, the counselor is the most important part of the school system for the student. I can trust her to help me and keep it confidential. Without her, I would hold my feelings in and eventually explode. Carrie writes, I'm a senior and I can't stress how important my school counselor is to me. Nothing can replace them. Amber writes, she is there when we need someone trustworthy to talk to. I mean, our school counselor has gotten to know all of the students very well, as if we were her family. Jill writes, those services will not have that personal relationship that makes the student feel comfortable and safe. They would also not be trained like a school counselor. I heard the sound. So the students, I'm going to read the last student says, no, this is their words. I'm very against taking counselors out of the school. The thought of this idea is ridiculous. Problems with children's lives come up every day, and we need someone to help us through it. I believe this idea is very wrong. Please reconsider this thought. This is from a student, not me. The students, the very people that the decisions affect, they plead for you to vote against any changes. Do not give the option for schools to replace school counselors. Listen to the students, your heart and your conscience, and cast your vote, like Mr. Lee said, to leave as it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you reaching out to me as well. Thank you for your time that you put in. Thank you. Heather Willis opposed, but with no comments. Caitlin Widener opposed, but with no comments. Jenny Tracot opposed, but no comments. Ashley Costello, followed up by Stephanie Braunstein.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Castello, and I am a professional school counselor in East Baton Rouge Parish. Thank you for hearing my concerns. One of the changes proposed in Bulletin 741 is that the services currently provided by school counselors may be provided through alternate means. Those alternate means are not clearly defined, but I know that there are no alternate means that have the same qualifications as a professional school counselor. School counselors hold, at a minimum, a master's degree from a KCREP accredited program, which includes coursework in group and individual counseling, children's development across their lifespan, counseling skills and theories, appraisal and accountability, ethical decision-making, personal, social, academic, and career development, and how to utilize all of those skills in a school setting. Without the appropriate training and skills, individuals of alternate means, even with the best of intentions, may provide inappropriate responses that could jeopardize a student's well-being. If it is the goal of this board to make changes to Bulletin 741 that would best accommodate and benefit the children of the state of Louisiana, then the required ratio should be changed to provide one certified professional school counselor for every 250 students, which is the recommended best practice by both the American and Louisiana School Counseling Associations. As a school counselor who works with children every day to address their social, personal, and emotional needs, I ask you to please reconsider the changes proposed to Bulletin 741 today, which would, according to its language and regardless of its intentions, give districts the ability to eliminate school counselors from our schools and hire more cost-effective but less qualified alternate means, and thereby deny students access to the valuable resources that are school counselors. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Lee, I'll recognize you now.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, and if I get a second, I'd like to speak to it.
And I may interrupt you real quick, and I'm going to let you come back to it. I know that we have other speakers. I wanted Mr. Lee to get his motion out on the table for consideration, which may impact or may not impact the other speakers to come forward. So, okay. Mr. Lee.
I move that we revert to the prior policies for counselors and librarians with the provision that school systems that may need exceptions make those requests to the state superintendent for his consideration.
Do you mind reading it one more time, and then we'll see if we get a second?
I move that we revert to the prior policies, meaning the policies that are in effect now, for counselors and librarians, with the provision that school systems that may need exceptions make those requests to the state superintendent for his consideration.
I'll second that.
So,
and if I may, can I speak to it?
You may. I want to state it clearly that there was a motion.
Did it get a second?
There was a motion and a second. The motion was to revert to the previous policy language, but allowing for those requests to be made to the superintendent for exceptions to that previous policy. Right. I restated it, but is that what it says?
That's correct.
Mr. Lee, would you like to comment?
The Blue Ribbon Commission studied for a long time the counseling services and made some very serious recommendations to this board. The board approved those recommendations to strengthen the counseling services. And the same has been true with the librarian services throughout the years. And while those services are not what they should be today, at least we're moving in the direction of giving attention to those services. Students today need more help than ever before. They're harder to reach. They need help that many of them are not getting at home or other places. So the role of the counselor and the librarian is critically important and getting more important. This motion puts it in the hands of the local school system to say these services need to be provided, the policy provides for it, and that's what we as a board would expect. Now, if you feel you have to have exceptions, you make that request to the state superintendent, and he can give whatever consideration he thinks appropriate. Now, that's the essence of what the motion.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly, before we get additional comments, because we've got a motion and a second, I will recognize you, Dr. Moranti. I don't know if the superintendent wants to make a comment in regard to the motion, or do you want to wait until you hear additional conversation? That's up to you.
For the sake of efficiency, I'll say that in the spirit of compromise, Mr. Lee, I think that is, and given the voices that we've heard today, of course we've made the changes and I supported those, but I think reverting to the original policy, provided that a school superintendent has the ability to come to us and say, look, this is the situation, I think is a fair point. I support that idea.
Dr. Moraney.
Thank you, Mr. White, and I concur with your acceptance of it. Thank you very much.
Y'all couldn't hear her, but what she said was that, Mr. Romer, you're a brilliant person. Ms. Hill?
I just want to make a comment. As I listen to all of the concerns from the counselors in reference to this item, and it's just so critical because I'm a social worker, so I understand exactly where you guys are coming from. When you look at society today, when you look at all the tragedies that has transpired throughout this nation, we need to be increasing counselors and mental health professionals in our schools. And I strongly believe as a board, in order for us to reach the academic achievement that you are requesting and requiring, Superintendent White, you have to put those individuals into place to deal with those students' social, emotional, and mental and environmental issues within their communities. And so I'm just sitting here, and it's just so disheartening because listening to the young student that just came up and just poured out her heart about bullying, which is a critical issue in our school today. I just don't understand and can't see why we are where we are right now in reference to counseling and why we're trying to give these individuals, decrease their services when we should be increasing the profession as far as individuals working in this profession. Now, we as a board, we can sit here and vote on this, and I'm just sad, I just would be sad to say that we have a tragedy to transpire in Louisiana and it be on the backs of BESE and what the policies that we have put in place. And I just want to share, I had a student last year at Point Capice Central High School who committed suicide on campus. And when I went to that campus, it was so disheartening because this young lady was a bright student, 4.0 student, gifted student, talented in art. But she was missed within her class. She was not able to receive the resources that she needed as far as counseling because her mother had died of cancer 3 months prior to her committing suicide, living with her grandmother in a rural area who didn't have the resources to provide for her to do either extracurricular activities or to participate in any other activities within her district. And this little girl cried out. As I went to the school and read some of the writing, she was bright. She wrote poetry. And when I sat there and read her last poem, which was called My Last Friday, and she killed herself on a Friday. And she explained in detail of how she was going to commit suicide at the school. And even as much as I love our teachers, and they're certified, they have to go to various classes, but they are not skilled like counselors and social workers and mental health professionals to identify those students that need help. And so I agree with Mr. Lee's motion, but Ms. Beebe not here to give me a second on his motion, but I would recommend that we mandate that we have counselors in our school district and to increase mental health professionals in our school districts. And I just want to commend the counselors that's here today for all your hard work and dedication because I understand exactly what you guys go through on a day-to-day basis. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Orange-Jones.
Just want to say I appreciate Walter. I appreciate Mr. Lee's motion tremendously. I think a lot's been said already, so I don't want to belabor the points, but I appreciate the motion on the table. I too agree that the socio-emotional well-being of children matters greatly. The work of our social workers matter a lot, and I just appreciate that. I also appreciate the leadership of the board and appreciate the leadership of the superintendent to really continue to rethink this and think through what is ultimately going to be best for our children.
Mr. Gill.
I'll call the question.
Well, if I may, that requires a vote. Let me see if I can get through. I think I can do it without doing that. Ms. Bofi, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, the only comment I want to make is that we've learned a couple of things by looking at this policy. One of those, I understand that Mr. Lee's motion deals both with counselors and librarians. Is that correct? Yes. And that we've learned a great deal by looking at both of those policies. And so I would like to give the department an opportunity to look at the language and see if there are some lessons we've learned over the last few months that need to be incorporated into going back to the old policy. And when I talk about that, I mean, we weren't looking at elementary schools and middle schools before. Are we going to revert back to the old language where we exclude elementary schools and middle schools with the librarians? And so I just want to give you an opportunity as the department to look at that before we vote on this, if that's something that you feel like the department needs.
We always have the opportunity to come back, Ms. Bovee, in that regard. I don't know if you have additional comments.
Well, I guess I feel like, and I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Lee, but I feel like the motion reflects a desire on the part of our colleagues, Kathy, and there's another Kathy, by the way. There were 3 Kathys. I was looking at my calendar, and we've got Kathys everywhere, and it's getting very confusing, and I'm ready to move on to another name. But I think it reflects a desire to go back to the policy as it was, but I appreciate that Mr. Lee considered that there are some times when maybe there's something that needs to be done. But I hear that. I think it's the right move, and board members, I thank you for your comments on it. And we will go back and review internally any lessons learned and work with folks to see if there are any other further adjustments down the road that need to be made.
I will say this. We have a large number of cards still on this topic. No one has to waive the right to speak. I will recognize every single person. And I usually, when I'm ahead, I usually like to stop the game. I've done that a number of times. So I will recognize each one of you. And
have you ever been ahead, Mr. Chairman?
What's that?
Have you ever been ahead, Mr. Chairman?
I don't know. So I will go through. Certainly, you're welcome to say something if you'd like, or you can. Please state your name and make it brief. Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Braunstein, and I represent the Louisiana Library Association. And the landscape has shifted considerably since I first walked into this room earlier today. So I just would like to say that based on the direction I believe you are going right now, I support your reverting back to the earlier language that applies to school libraries and librarians, with the consideration, as was mentioned, that we need to again address the problem that existed even then, subliminally, I would say, about that the requirements need to extend to both elementary and middle school, not just secondary schools. And basically appreciate everything you all have done to work with us on this, and hopefully the compromises will work for all of us. And thank you again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the other Kathy Smith, the librarian one, and I also represent the Louisiana Association of School Librarians, a part of the Louisiana Library Association, and I would like to reiterate what Stephanie said, in that we appreciate all the work, the dialogue that we've had, and we would further appreciate the opportunity to clean up the language a little bit and modernize it a little bit, but appreciate the fact of going back to the original document that does require school libraries, and look forward to the opportunity to clarify that language and update it a bit.
Thank you. There are other speakers. Does anyone wish to come forward and speak that's turned in their card that has not yet spoken? Ms. Barrios, please come forward.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. I'm glad that you've come to this conclusion. Hopefully you'll vote for, but I did feel like there were a couple of things I had to take the opportunity to address. One of them is this idea of innovation, and the other one is of local control and flexibility. I totally agree with the local control and flexibility. Let's give the local school boards control of how they evaluate their teachers. Let's give them control of how they test and measure their students. Let's give them a lot of control and flexibility. As far as innovation is concerned, technology is no longer innovative, in case you haven't noticed, okay? But it's a tool. It is a tool. It's not a human body. Teachers and counselors and librarians and all of the other physical bodies in a school are what are the most important things in a school. You can't cuddle up to a computer at night. You can't run down the beach with your best friend computer in the daytime. You can't pour your heart out in front of a computer, although it looks like with blended learning, that's what we're going to end up with. So I ask you to be careful with this innovation idea. What is innovative? Okay, and replacing counselors or doing away with counselors and librarians is not innovative. Replacing them with computers is not. Thank you.
My name is Chiquita Rome. I'm a counselor in Ascension Parish, and I just want to make sure I have clarity on this. I know that Mr. Lee said that we were going to revert back to the old way it was written, but I want to make sure, because what I'm reading, the old way it was written, it sounds as if the counseling and the librarians only include secondary. So I wanted to make sure that when you're talking about reverting back, that the language includes elementary all the way up and secondary. Do I have that understanding? Is that what the plan is?
That's not what Mr. Lee's motion
That's not
said.
what his motion is? That's not what you...
Mr. Lee's motion said we simply go back to the previous language that was in the bulletin and allow districts to present to the superintendent if they want to make exceptions to the bulletin.
And the previous...
The previous bulletin,
language.
it's amazing, quite frankly. The previous bulletin did not require that elementary schools have library.
Yeah.
And I swear I see them in every one of them. I don't know how they got there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I didn't know, because I know earlier you mentioned about the librarians and making sure that you had librarians in all schools, and I just wanted to make sure that counselors were not overlooked as far as having a counselor in all schools, elementary, middle, and high. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Free.
Wayne Free, Louisiana Association of Educators. I had not originally placed a card. In the past, I've done keynotes at state and national library associations all around this country on technology integration. In that process, I've learned that I know less in many ways than the librarians do, and that's why I didn't spin a card. I was sure they could do it. However, one issue did come up that needs to be addressed by this board and this department. And that is, how do you make sure that you ask the people who really know before you develop policy? Had you done that, the policy might have been much more effective. I've told you this before, let me say it one more time. We are not smarter than the people doing it every day. Get them engaged.
You know what, Mr. Free, you can do whether stay here or leave. I just feel like I need to comment. First of all, we looked at a policy going back over the last year at a book of regulations that was this thick, that is almost universally loathed and feared by every educator in this state. And we worked real hard to try to gut the things that don't help kids. And you know what? Along the way, we learned that actually, maybe when you do that and you try to be bold, sometimes you get tripped up. So we put something on notice of intent. And over the process that this state's government and laws spell out for public comment, we took public comment, meaning that what we're ending up with, and I'm not a board member, but I'm going to speak for our department and our overall effort, is a bulletin that is a heck of a lot better in the classroom, and then a process, a democratic process that allowed us to make sure that we cleaned up some potholes in our own policy on the way. So I have to say that with respect and with deep admiration for these board members who have urged our department to keep looking at it, while I accept your premise that we always want to ask questions first, there's nothing wrong with policies working their way through the process and arriving at the best possible place at the end. I think that's what's happened. And so rather than feeling ashamed of mistakes made in the past, I think everybody up on this dais and everybody in this audience should take pride at a better policy accomplished for the 700,000 kids of this state today. And I know that you didn't mean to contradict that, but I want to say that because I don't want anyone feeling bad right now. We should be feeling good about this policy and its effect for children.
And I want to make it clear that I also believe that there are lots of things that need to be looked at in the policies and continue to be looked at. But looking at them without engaging as much as possible beforehand would help in this process.
Mr. Free, if I may
Mr.
add.
Chairman,
Yeah.
didn't the previous person with the association come and say thank you for all of the countless hours working with the superintendent? They disagreed with some of where the language was, but I don't understand the process complaint. I don't think is fair to the superintendent and the process they went through. And I think he made a great point. The language 2 hours ago is different than the language today. The collaboration has continued to this very minute. And so has it been a long exercise? Yes. But to come here and say that he didn't follow the proper process, I don't think it's fair. I really don't.
The engagement
Mr.
of
Free,
the
I
library.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
You got it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And please state your name.
I'm Dr. Maggio, Louisiana Library Association, but I just want to make a couple of comments because I'm probably the only public librarian here. I'm a public library director, and I support going back, but I do like that if you would add about the elementary and middle school librarians, because where I come from, they have all, except for the high school, they have all been, gotten rid of due to budget cuts. And I want to tell you, those poor students who are in those schools, they have no school library, and they have to come to public library. We welcome them, but you and I both know that a lot of students are not going to be able to make it to the public library. They may not have a home computer. Most of them probably don't, because we're fairly poor in our part of the state. So for those reasons, I'd ask that you really consider putting in the elementary and middle school librarians and make it a part of the rule of the old rules, but just add those in. And I thank you very much for looking at it, and I'm pleased with the adjustments that you have worked on. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kirsten Williams from Louisville High School, and I wasn't going to speak after what was just said, but considering the comment on not asking students, I felt it was important that I came up and I spoke. With regards to school librarians, I feel as if I wouldn't be where I am today without my librarian. I'm a valedictorian at my high school. I'm a National Merit semifinalist. I'm very active in where I am right now, and I feel like that started from a young age with my school librarian, making sure to foster an appreciation for books and for reading. And it's become apparent as we were discussing coming to this meeting that students do not feel that we're asked at all. These decisions are regarding us, and no one makes an effort to inform us what's going on. We feel as if our opinions are on the back burner, considering that we're supposed to be the beneficiaries. And with regards to the bulletin that was supposed to be reformed whenever we first got to this meeting, any student that I spoke to in my school was absolutely appalled. We were disgusted, we were disappointed, and we felt that it showed a lack of respect for our librarians and our counselors to take away their job security, to act as if they can be replaced with someone that would do their job better than they would. That's what we
Appreciate
felt,
your comments.
and that's why I felt it was important to come and speak.
Appreciate you speaking. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Charlene Peachlew, and I'm Kirsten's high school librarian. I come from a small rural combination school, Louisville High School, where almost 80% of our students are on free or reduced lunch, and 47% of our students have no cell phone reception or internet access for that matter. You see, we rely on the fringes of the Atchafalaya Basin. They are dependent on their school library and the sources that we provide, whether it be books or whether it be internet and computers. Although there's a public library, the hours of operation only allow for 2 hours after school and no weekend hours. We are a high-achieving A school with 120.5, and I was concerned that with the cuts for no funding being mentioned in the language, that it would decrease what we provide to our students, and it would have a negative effect on a high-achieving school. So I'm glad to see that funding has been also mentioned, and we can count on that as being important for school libraries.
Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Seal, another Kathy, Mr. White. I'm also here with the Librarians Association. And Mr. Nakam, I'm a proud graduate of South Lafourche High School, the second graduating class, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you. I have just very few brief comments. Superintendent White, we really do appreciate that you entertained our comments, and we like 98% of what is in the newest revision. Mr. Lee, you said something right when we started our conversation on 7.1, that you were very concerned about item number 2 down at the bottom where it says principals shall have the authority. And if I remember correctly, you said that principals don't work for the BESE board. I think that's the way you phrased it. And I share the same concern, although I'm not really sure of the correct terminology that I should use to phrase it. But I just think that local school districts, from my level of being a district manager on up the way to more important levels, all the way to the superintendent, would take great offense that a principal could decide whether or not a school was going to have a library, much less a librarian. And so I'm not really sure how that should be stated, because I think the intent, as I understand it from Superintendent White, is the alternate structures. Reading between the lines.
To be clear, that language won't be included when we revert. That the language that you're referencing is not in the old language.
And to be clear, we really like most of this new language. We would prefer it.
You should have come up earlier, but that's okay.
Well, the problem is with that item number 2, and I think that there's one other thing that I want to say. I'm a technology person, a technology tool person, but I want you to know what librarians do. We select resources, and we teach our customers, our patrons, faculties, and students how to use those resources. And we teach them that the Google and internet search engines are not the first line of defense. We scrape our pennies together to buy fee-based databases so we can provide them with quality resources that they can use to discriminate between useful and not useful information. I can't wait till we have e-libraries. And I've heard of a few high schools that have totally electronic libraries, but I am so curious to find out who assists the students and the teachers, who purchases the resources, and how on earth can they afford e-fiction, because the industry is just not there yet. So when we get to the point when we want to talk about e-libraries and that type of alternate method, the Louisiana Library Association, I'm sure, stands ready to entertain that conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Board members, if I might suggest, Mr. Chairman, just a quick thought. It sounds to me like we've come to a good place. Mr. Lee's motion suggests we go back to the original language. There's been some thinking, I know, from some members of the Librarian Association now we're saying, you know, we've got an issue with the old language too. I understand that. We can't kind of have it both ways at this time. We're going to have to go back and, you know, as colleagues, we'll work on those issues down the line. But let's not get them confused, and let's move ahead with where we are.
We have had a couple board members that have requested comment. Mr. Garvey, do you still wish to make comment?
Yeah, and I'll be real quick. Mr. Freed mentioned something about us not taking advice from people who know. My understanding is that this recommendation came from superintendents, local superintendents, and I think that local superintendents pretty much know what's going on in their school districts, and that's their responsibility to take the whole district into account. I was against these changes, and I'm glad we are making this, but I do want to express my support for Superintendent White for bringing changes like this to us so we can look at them and vote some up and vote some down. Thank you.
I think that's all the comments. I'm going to reserve I'm going to say a comment real quick. I appreciate everyone's patience very much. I appreciate you taking time to be here and send us emails and letters and come. It's an important part of the process and one that I try to always promote best I can. And I hope I didn't step on anybody too much today as you tried to testify. I certainly wanted to give you each an opportunity to say so. I appreciate Mr. Lee's, well, I wasn't going to say wise old man, but that's not the right thing to say at all, Walter. I should restate that completely. So I appreciate you coming up with a compromise that I think gives us a pause. It allows for some flexibility, but we still recognize that there's a need to look at the language. I'll make a comment quickly. If you look at the language, I know the language created a great deal of fear. The language did not do what many people believed it did. I want to be fair to the superintendent and others. It didn't tell anybody that they had to lose their job. It didn't say that we thought counselors or librarians were unimportant. Now, you can think that the change in the language insinuates that, and I understand that, and I appreciate your comments, but I want to make certain. I went to, it's interesting, and we had to talk about technology. I think if you're satisfied with the education system that we have in this state right now, you're different than me. That's okay. Now, I'm not satisfied. I think there are many changes we need to consider, technology, a number of them. Libraries and bulletins. Bulletin 741 for me is nonsense. I've said that before. It's a list of rules that prohibit and inhibit people from being creative and people from considering new and different and better ideas. I went to Harvard. The second largest library in the United States was right next to where I lived my freshman year. One of my favorite memories is walking in that building. It goes 6 floors underground, 6 floors above ground. There are 99 libraries on Harvard's campus, 99 libraries. It's the hallmark of Harvard, the library. Now, what's interesting is that every one of their documents is now online. That library is still relevant and still critical to that community. Now, we need to consider as a state, are we open to things being different? I appreciate very much, and we learned in this process that this process, while difficult, is an important one. And I think we've come up with a solution that meets both of our needs at this moment in time. But we're going to have more of these discussions. We're going to have a lot more about, do we serve our kids in the most efficient, best way at the individual level? Do we do that? And I think without exception we can say we don't do that. And one of the things that hold us back is bureaucratic rules that meant well but end up keeping people from being able to take responsibility for their own job. And it's the responsibility of districts and the responsibility of principals and the responsibility of counselors and librarians and teachers to deliver the best education they can to every child. And some of these rules that we have inhibit that ability. I believe that to the bottom of my heart. Now, I appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate you being here today. And we have a motion on the floor. We're going to actually have two motions. The first motion deals with these two. I'm going to let Nina clarify the language, and then we'll have a vote. Thank you. Let's do it as one.
So, Mr. Lee and Ms. Hill, to move this forward properly procedurally, LDE staff and BESE staff needs some additional directives that Shan alluded to at the beginning. So I will read to you, and you can shoot me down and say no, or you can say that's it. So it's basically a four-point motion by Mr. Lee, seconded by Ms. Hill, to receive the summary of public comments and agency response regarding Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, Sections 1125, Comprehensive Counseling, and Section 1705, School Libraries and Media Centers. Direct BESE staff to not proceed with the final adoption of the March 20th Notice of Intent regarding revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators. Revert to the prior policy for Section 1125 and 1705 with provision that school systems that may need exceptions to those two sections may make those requests to the State Superintendent of Education for his consideration. And finally, to direct BESE staff to submit for publication in the Louisiana Register as a new notice of intent all other sections previously approved by the board as notice of intent in January 2013.
That's exactly the way I said it.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, so moved. That concludes the business of this committee, the school, and I thank everyone for being here. The school